Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Audit and Governance Committee on January the 27th, 2025. My name is Councillor Marcus Andrews. Will be chairing the meeting this evening. Before we actually start the actual meeting itself, can I go over to the Democratic Services Officer for the housekeeping rules? Thank you.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the front car park of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum. Mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies. Have we had any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've had an apology from Councillor Michael Tarling and also from Lindy Jansen van Vuren. And also note that Councillor Vicky Slade is attending remotely.
And substitutes. Do we have any substitutes?
Yes, Councillor Tony Trent is substituting for Councillor Tarling today.
Thank you for that. Item 3 on the agenda. Has there been any declarations of interest reported to you?
No declarations received to date.
Okay, committee members, if anybody has a declaration of interest, reference anything on the agenda this evening, it's not too late, you can mention it now. Just look around the room, no indications. Moving therefore on to item 4, confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the last meeting on the 28th of November 2024 have been circulated with the agenda. Before we go to accepting the minutes, I need to provide the following update. In relation to minute number 51 of these minutes, namely confirmation of the minutes, there is a further update to the response provided to the public question from Mr. Alex McKinstry at the 25th of July committee meeting, and the subsequent updates to that response I provided on the 5th of September and the 17th of October committees. The latest update is as follows. A summary of the management accounts was included in the board packs which the Chief Executive, as the Council's shareholder representative, other senior managers and councillors while they were on the board received for each board meeting, which were held every 6 to 8 weeks. So whilst Future Places did not technically meet the specific requirements set out in the shareholders' agreement, there was regular and acceptable visibility of the management accounts within the council. That's the end of the statement. I would like to seek a proposer and a seconder to accept the minutes for our last meeting. Councillor Beasley?
Chairman, could you just take a couple of matters arising for clarification over the accuracy of the minutes first, though?
Yes, you've got any queries?
So the statement you've just read out, you began by saying a summary of the management accounts was included in the board packs which the Chief Executive, as the Council's shareholder representative, and other senior managers and councillors. Could you just clarify, did you use exactly those words?
I'll read it out again. Right, I'll start from here. A summary of the management accounts were included in the board packs which the Chief Executive, as the Council's shareholders representative, other senior managers and councillors while they were on the board received for each board meeting.
Sorry, and the rest.
I'll continue. Which were held every 6 to 8 weeks. So whilst Future Places did not technically meet the specific requirements set out in the shareholders' agreement, there was regular and acceptable visibility of the management accounts within the council.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. That's clarified it. I thought there was a word missing in there, but I'm perfectly happy with what you've just read out, because I believe that actually accurately reflects the position. My other question, and I know we've had correspondence about this, is with relation to what was agreed at the last meeting in November. and it concerns the Future Places inquiry. When we get to the forward plan, obviously there'll be perhaps more to say about that then. But the wording that's been used in the minutes talks about a briefing and investigation on Future Places. It's my recollection, and I think the tape might support this, that when that was moved and seconded, it was to have an investigation on Future Places. It didn't involve anything to do with a briefing. And then in the forward plan, that then says that it's been termed as Future Places Update Report, which is certainly not what was agreed, because it was, again, an investigation, and just an investigation and nothing more. I'm making those points now, Chairman, because the context needs to be seen around why I'm querying the minute, because it then relates to what's later on in the agenda.
Councillor Margaret Phipps. Microphone.
Right, I've got it now, I think. It didn't look like this before. Okay, yeah, I'd like to totally agree with what's just been said. And if actually Councillor Beasley hadn't brought this up, I had it in my notes to bring this up. What is in the minutes, in my view, is incorrect. We were not going to have a briefing. In fact, as I recall, because Councillor Connolly mentioned having an investigation and she wasn't at the meeting, you were on Teams, I said, as you can't propose it, I will. And the Chief Executive came into the discussion on Teams and he said, oh, maybe we could do an update or a briefing or whatever he said, something like that. And we did not agree to that. We actually specifically agreed to an investigation. So in my view, those minutes are wrong, and I am also quite concerned that then the forward plan says it's just an update report, which kind of kicks it down the road and means it's absolutely nothing. So I'm not happy with the minutes as they stand. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Broadhead, welcome to the committee.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And whilst it might seem unusual for me to comment on minutes, and when I wasn't at the last meeting, I actually did watch the last meeting today on YouTube, and I can confirm what Councillor Phipps and Councillor Beasley have said. It was pretty clear when Councillor Phipps put forward that recommendation that it was for an investigation, and that was the formal recommendation as it stands. So I would agree that, having just watched only a few hours ago this very meeting, that the minutes don't reflect what that committee decided. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. It's just also to agree with that and to add that I recall us having that in that discussion, us agreeing that we would have a scoping out conversation. And I do recall, Councillor Beasley, that you were very keen to ensure that you were part of that conversation as well. I'm not seeing that reflected. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. I have seen a transcript of the debate leading up to that resolution that was voted upon, and there were views expressed by the people at the meeting, and there were some other comments made. My view on this matter is that since Future Places was in existence and came out of existence, we've had 2 independent members join the committee, and we've got a whole bunch of new councillors or people who haven't previously been on ANG. And I personally felt, particularly because Future Places was not a direct committee organisation of the council, it was a separate company, that it would benefit everybody on both sides of the fence, as it were, to learn more about how Future Places came into existence and actually have a timeline of events as to, I think it was March 2021, and I don't know the precise date when the company was effectively liquidated, for some background. Now, I don't know whether the monitoring officer's got any comments to make about that, because obviously it's something whereby if we do change the recommendation there or correct the minutes, that is going to obviously create particular work, whereby obviously at the moment we're trying as a council to get a balanced budget. But that's my view. Councillor Broad, I'd like to probably hear from the monitoring officer first before I let you come back.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at the transcript that I have of the last meeting. The motion that was put forward was a proposal from Councillor Phipps to have effectively future places briefing stroke investigation added to the forward plan. That was seconded and that was carried. In order to undertake any of that work, however, a briefing will be required to ascertain the scope of a meeting will be required to ascertain the scope of any briefing or investigation, because there is already so much information in the public domain, and it would be impossible for either myself or Graham or any other officer to try and guess what this committee wants to see. So there will have to be some form of briefing in order to make the recommendation which was carried by this meeting on the last occasion, which is a briefing stroke investigation to become inactive. So I think the wording is actually correct in the forward plan, because that is the wording from the transcript taken from the last meeting, Chair.
So the idea is to have a briefing and move forward to an investigation. I think it would be very valuable for the new committee members to learn more about it. You know, people have read things about future places in the media, but it would be useful to find out more about the ins and outs of what went on in terms of its birth and, you know, its demise. We've got somebody. Councillor Broadhead did ask to come back first. So Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, and if I may, Chair, I think there's two things that we're perhaps conflating here. Your prerogative as Chair to make suggestions about how things might progress and whether there are briefings as well as investigations, and then actually the accuracy of the minutes. And where I would differ in the transcript that we're talking about, I think what the transcript that you're discussing, having watched it today, might be your summary at the end of the meeting where you said briefing or investigation. But actually when Councillor Phipps was proposing the actual proposal, which is what I think we're talking about in terms of verifying the minutes and therefore what the proposal actually was, I don't think she used the word briefing at all. Now, I actually don't disagree that as part of that you might well wish to have a briefing, but I think it's really important that the thing that the committee actually voted on is reflected within the minutes, so that that the committee actually carries out what it agreed to do. So I would just slightly push back against this idea that it was briefing / investigation, because I don't think Councillor Phipps used the word briefing once.
I could suggest, and it would be merely the insertion of the word "and." So briefing and investigation on future basis. I read it out. Resolved that a briefing and an investigation on future basis be added to the committee's forward plan. Sam Acton, because she hasn't spoken.
Thanks.
So.
I think if you just adjust that to a briefing followed by the investigation, because the briefing has to take place for the investigation to take place, is what I understood from the monitoring officer, and that is what we agreed in the meeting. So I understand that maybe the minutes haven't been recorded correctly, but that is how it should read. Is that correct, Jeannie? Yeah, thank you.
We've got the monitoring officer nodding at what Sam Acton said. So, Councillor Phipps.
Oh, certainly the meaning or the intention when I put forward the proposal was for an investigation. I did not expect it to get watered down in any way. Now, I appreciate there might be a briefing first, but one of the things I was going to say was we need to be looking, we're here on an agenda item to agree the minutes and the accuracy of the minutes. As far as I'm concerned, I asked for an investigation, and I think that's what it says. Now, if we end up with a briefing and an investigation, fine, but why are we changing things to say a briefing followed by, or a briefing stroke, or whatever? I think we need to have what was actually intended, and we all voted on it. So I think anybody that voted for it here, please tell me that was the intention, wasn't it? Thank you. So I really do think we need to vote here on the accuracy of the minutes, and I don't think they're accurate. That's my opinion.
Well, echoing what Sam Acton said, she has got a vote, but resolved that a briefing followed by an investigation on future places be added to the committee's forward plan.
Well, no, what it is The process requires the briefing first. So there's muddle. The investigation's not been watered down or taken away, but to make the investigation happen, a briefing needs to take place to set the parameters and the definition of what that investigation would be. So it's just that the minutes need making more accurate to reflect exactly what you proposed. But I think we all understand now what is necessary to make the investigation happen.
Monitoring officer, would
say
that
I think that's all it is.
be
Chair, if I may just read from your proposal to the committee immediately before the vote was taken. This is the actual transcript from the meeting. And then we have had a proposal from Councillor Phipps to have effectively future places, briefing, stroke investigation added to the forward plan. Councillor Beasley has seconded. So can we take a vote on that? So that's recorded, please. All those in favour, there were 5. Any against, there was 1. There was 1 abstention. And then the matter moved on. So that was the proposal presented by the chair of the meeting that was actually voted on. So that is in accordance with the transcript that's taken directly from the last meeting, Chair, just for clarity.
Councillor Beasley?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to take issue with the monitoring officer because that isn't accurate. I didn't second it. And in fact, I think if you go on to the transcript, if you see it online, you'll find that I didn't. There was a bit of a discussion about that. And there was a reason why I didn't second it. And then the chairman had to find a seconder. And I didn't want to be one of those members of this committee who had brought this forward because I want to participate fully in an investigation, and I wouldn't want people then to say it was because I brought it to the committee in the first place. So that was incorrect, if I may make that. So you cannot record that in the minutes. So there's some very fundamental points here about council process and procedure. And it is really imperative that when minutes are recorded in writing, albeit that they are always a summary, a shortened summary, that they are entirely accurate, that they aren't, if you like, rewritten by others at a later time to suit the convenience of whatever thinking has gone on in between. And I suggest, Chairman, that's exactly what's happened here. So, as far as I'm concerned, we were voting on an inquiry because that's what I want to see. I since have written to you about that inquiry on the 1st of December, and I reminded you on 2 other occasions, and I got a response. But my reason for doing that was very much around the scoping being critical to be done, including myself, and I've made some serious suggestions about the breadth of that scoping. And it was in the light of what the Chief Executive said at the meeting about us doing that outside of a public meeting, which I totally disagree with. So that is where we got to at that stage. And then I see in the forward plan, that has moved on from what we agreed to something really quite unrelated in saying it's future places update report. That is not what it was. That was not the will of the committee, and that was not what we agreed. We agreed to an investigation, and if it's necessary to privately brief to bring people up to speed and to copy them in on previous reports, well, that's a matter for you and the officers. But what is not acceptable is that we get some sort of briefing, which, if you like, is a synopsis of what's occurred over a long period of time, presented by the officers, which then may well be, as you will know from my email to you on the 1st of December, in conflict with what the committee are trying to achieve through an inquiry. And I think it is wrong to be going down that course, particularly in view of the comments made at our last meeting by the Chief Executive.
I do actually have the Chief Executive indicating he'd like to speak. So, Mr. Farron, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I'm just concerned at Councillor Beasley's comments just now. I think he suggested that the monitoring officer had not read the transcript of the meeting accurately. I do believe that what Ms. Berry was reading was the transcript of the meeting. Just to remind the meeting, it was after that I think the chairman had suggested that Councillor Beasley had seconded it. Councillor Beasley then corrected that, but I don't believe that actually changed the nature or the content of the recommendation. I believed it changed who was recorded as seconding it. So I do believe that Ms. Berry has just read the transcript of the meeting accurately. I think that's what's reflected in the recommendation or in the minutes. Of course, the committee can agree something different within that, but I just wanted to defend the monitoring officer from what I detected was an accusation that she had not read the transcript accurately or had changed the transcript subsequently.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I do recall, Councillor Beasley, you, when I did suggest you were seconding it, you said you didn't, and somebody else actually did it in the end. But that, you know, that's a transcript, etc., etc.
But Chairman, I have to come back. That is not what the monitoring officer told us a moment ago. That is not what she said. So she is reading to us something which is inaccurate. And I'm not accusing her of anything, as the Chief Executive says. I'm trying to get clarification and accuracy. And it seems in this council very difficult to achieve that these days.
I've got Graham coming.
Chair, I'm very happy. Chair, I'm very happy to read out the entirety of the transcript around this element, if that assists. So that it may be on the record, but I can absolutely assure members of this committee that the systems that we operate do allow us to obtain a formal transcript of every meeting, and this meeting is no exception. I do have before me the transcript that I've been provided by Democratic Services, which I absolutely trust 1,000%. This is a correct transcript of the meeting that was held in November and this particular debate. I have read out accurately the proposal that you, Chair, read out, which was voted on. There was then a debate around the inclusion in the forward plan, and that happened. And but I'm very happy to read out the entire transcript if you wish. But it can be circulated to the meeting.
The transcript
moves
on where Councillor Beasley said he hadn't seconded it, where we took it again. Councillor Phipps proposed it, and it was actually Councillor Armstrong that seconded it. That is in the transcript. What I would say is, if the members are not willing to accept the accuracy of the minutes reference that particular item, they are at liberty to change that particular item. The independent member Sam has suggested a form of wording to at variance or correction, and I will ask the Democratic Services Officer if you did note that to read that change out. I could read it myself. Resolved that a briefing followed by an investigation on future places be added to the committee's forward plan. Is that acceptable to the committee? Councillor Phipps, you were first.
If we're not in agreement with that section, like you say, you just said we could resolve to change that. So I would like to change it to, we wanted an investigation. If we don't have to put this in the minutes, it's an investigation, full stop. And in the scheme of things, if we end up with a briefing first, that's a different matter. It's the wording in the minutes. There's an investigation. And then the next bit that wants changing is who seconded it. If that's wrong, if it says in there that Councillor Beasley seconded it, that's
not recorded in the printed minutes who actually seconded it.
It is.
But in
okay,
the transcript we have a record.
So I would like to see it, investigation, not briefing, on there. That's what I would like.
Okay, if you've got a seconder to that correction,
I have a seconder.
Councillor Beasley. So if we could just read out what that resolution will now read. Resolved that an investigation on future places be added to the committee's forward plan. If that's acceptable to the people who were at the meeting, some of you were here. Councillor Armstrong, I think you indicated a second.
I'd like it recorded, actually, for the public record, that I did second this, and actually that the intent that I was seconding was an investigation into future places, and also a scoping meeting, not a briefing, a scoping meeting for us to agree what the extent of that that investigation was going to look like. That's what I was seconding.
Vice Chairman, you haven't had a say yet.
Yes, just to say that I was obviously involved in the initial proposal for this, so I'm very much supportive of this, and I don't see there as being any intent to water it down. From my perspective, I wasn't a councillor when a lot of this happened, so I think it would be really helpful for me to learn more about it, the timeline, all the work that's been done, what's in the public domain, and then have the scoping discussion about what exactly we want to see in it. What I was thinking about was maybe we could have an informal decision, informal discussion amongst ourselves around the scoping of it, maybe a briefing as part of that. And then I thought, no, it's much better if this is all out in public. So let's have a very simple factual report that comes before us, outlining what's in the public domain already, get councillors like myself up to speed, and then as a committee, we can then discuss what further we want as part of this. So I don't think there's any intent to water it down. I think the report, as in the forward plan at the moment, is just that first step, that kind of setting it all out to bring us up to speed, and then we can discuss where we want to go from there. So this is an attempt to be transparent and open, rather than have a sort of scoping meeting amongst, out of the public and amongst ourselves. So that's the idea.
Sam Acton?
Question for Nigel. The process, is it defined how an investigation takes place, and that a first part or an early stage part of an investigation would be this briefing or scoping session, in which case just using the word investigation, which we're not watering down, is going to be perfectly fine, and we're going to get everything covered?
We're getting well away from the accuracy of the minutes. We've had a proposal by Councillor Phipps and Councillor Armstrong, I think.
I'm concerned that the officers might lose their process.
This is all on the forward plan for item 13 on the agenda, and we can go back to it later. But all we're trying to do at the moment is confirm the accuracy of the minutes. We've had a proposal, which Councillor Armstrong, I believe, has seconded. Sorry, Councillor Beasley, get that right? You did second it this time. And can we have a show of hands for that correction first, please? I'll be voting.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Abstentions?
So
Right.
can we agree the minutes as amended?
So we can agree the minutes as amended. So we don't need to take a vote on that, but we can agree. Yeah, for the record.
I propose the amended minutes as accurate.
And
Everybody agreed?
okay, I will sign it as corrected. Okay, thank you for that. I will now sign the minutes, but I'll do that during the meeting, won't delay things. Item 5, public issues. Are there any public questions?
There are, Chair. There's a public question from Mr. Alex McKinstry in relation to agenda item 13, forward plan, if you'd like to come forward.
Can you hear me adequately, Chair?
Thank you. Yes, I can. Nice new microphones.
This is so relevant. On the 28th of November 2024, this committee resolved to add to its forward plan, and this is a quote from the original draft minutes, a briefing / investigation into future places, unquote. And the timbre of the debate, TIMBRE, the timbre of the debate was that there would be an initial meeting held in public to determine the scope of that investigation. As far as I can see, however, the only relevant addition to the forward plan since then is a future places update report to be presented at some point between May 2025 and March 2026. Can the Chair clarify whether an informal meeting has already taken place in relation to the future places investigation? And if so, what was the outcome of that meeting and what themes were explored? If no such meeting has been held, can I suggest that the scheduling of an initial scoping meeting be discussed when it comes to debating item 13 on this evening's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Kinstry, for your question. The answer is no. An informal meeting of the committee has not taken place.
Thanks for that.
I don't think there are any other public questions, but I think there is a public statement, and that's been received from Mr. Philip Gattrell in relation to agenda item 6, the statement of accounts 2023-2024. He's not here this evening, so the Democratic Services Officer will read out his statement. Thank you.
My previous public issues include officers' contraventions of legislation when not responding in time to annual accounting information requests by local government electors. This negates registered electors' rights of questions and objections to the auditor to ensure substantive replies. Despite that failure repeating for 2023-24, I identified before the deadline an irregular payment of £37,500 for compensation of loss of office to the dual function statutory monitoring officer. When shortly before her leaving, reminding the officer concerning outstanding issues, I was informed she was not retiring, contrary to members' understanding. The statutory appointment required members' ratification. Consequently, the compensation, at least partly, is an unlawful item of account under the 2014 Act, Section 28. The auditor accepted my objection following notification on the 12th of July 2024, and I await a stated progress being made update. Separately, however, the Chief Executive must promptly explain to all members the deemed authority for the compensation payment.
Thank you for that. And there are no other statements, so we can move on to items of business. Item 6 on the agenda is the statement of accounts 2023-2024. If members will recall, we particularly moved the meeting to this date to allow a sufficient window for Mr. Peter Barber from Grant Thornton to provide a verbal update on the progress in hand. And he is joining us on Teams. So without any further ado, Mr. Barber, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. At the previous meeting of this committee, I did comment on the 23-24 audit, the opinion audit, and did indicate that it was well progressed. We've made further progress since that meeting, and we are now on the home straight, but we've not quite managed to conclude everything ahead of this evening's committee. So it was our original intention, as you say, Chair, to bring the audit findings report alongside the draft accounts to this committee, but it is now our intention to bring both reports and the committee, the statement of accounts to the next meeting of this committee, which is at the end of February. Importantly, this will still allow us time to meet the end of February deadline for concluding all 23-24 audits nationally. Now, what I wanted to do, Chair, was give a brief summary of the position we're in, recognising the detail will follow next month. So just a bit of context, and I've referenced this before in prior years. Given the size and complexity of the audit at BCP, it is inevitable a number of changes will arise. So once again, our audit has identified a number of adjustments, and these have been agreed with officers and will be made to the final set of accounts that we brought to this committee next month. Importantly, there are no issues to date that would necessitate a modification to our auditor's report in respect to those 23-24 transactions. But as discussed at previous meetings, we will need to disclaim the opinion for 23-24 to reflect the absence of assurances over the opening balances based on the fact that I backstopped the opinion for the prior year. So in terms of the main areas outstanding that meant we couldn't bring the detailed report here this evening, the main one remains the IAS 19 pension fund liability letter of assurance. I am acutely aware that this has been discussed at length at previous meetings of this committee. We do, as of today, await that letter of assurance from pension fund auditors, Dorset Pension Fund. We have, importantly, received a draft letter, which covers probably about 90% of the coverage, and we are anticipating receiving a final letter in the next week. I have sought clarification from colleagues as to why there continues to be a delay, and their response is that pension fund officers, Dorset Pension Fund, have committed to working before Christmas with their predecessor auditors to enable them to backstop the prior year audit, and this has distracted them from actually providing that final information that my colleagues need to get the work over the line. Importantly, I remain confident that this letter will be arriving shortly, and believe that we're in a very much different and better position than we were last year when that letter wasn't forthcoming. So that is the main area outstanding. We have a small number of other areas that we are continuing to work on, and we are aiming to conclude that work within the next week, and that will then enable us, hopefully, to conclude the audit. Now, as referred to on the previous item on the agenda, just for completeness and complete clarity, I have received an objection from a member of the public. Work is well progressed in considering that objection. We're in the final stages of concluding our response, and I will be aiming to respond to the objector as soon as practically possible, recognising that response will firstly need to go through our own legal team and ultimately be shared with public sector audit appointments for comment prior to issuing. So that is just for completeness, because that is an important aspect of concluding the audit ahead of the end of February. So I will stop there, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions on the 23-24 opinion audit.
Okay, thank you for that summary. I'm looking around the room. Nobody's particularly indicating to ask you any questions. Obviously, I will make the comment again. It's not just BCP accounts which are delayed. In fact, there's very few councils that are 100% up to speed getting their accounts done. You know, this is a nationwide problem, I believe, isn't it, Mr. Barber? It's not just BCP.
Chair, you're right. I think we have conversations about the extent of the challenge nationally at every audit committee. So there are a large number of councils that have multiple years of outstanding audits. Well, they did have until the backstop was applied to all 22, 23 audits in prior years in the middle of December last year. So the backstop approach has cleared those backstopped audits for all councils up until 22-23. A number of councils have had multiple years backstopped. We backstopped 1 year at BCP. There are a number of councils where we had no backstopped audits, but you are within a wider group of councils that have had backstopped audits nationally. And clearly the whole purpose of the backstop is to reset and ensure that audits return to a timely manner. And we have been working very hard with officers and the finance team at BCP to ensure that your 23-24 audit is a full audit and is not a backstopped audit, which is the case at still a significant number of councils.
Thank you for that. And thank you for your good work. And obviously, yes, I'm pleased to hear that there will be a full audit for the financial year just to ending up in April. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask Mr. Barber, it follows on from my question at last audit and governance meeting, and it's with regard to the Dorset County Pension Fund, of which I'm a committee member of some years. And I just wanted your assurance that with Grant Thornton taking on the audit function for Dorset Council and thereby the pension fund, are you confident that you're getting a full and proper handover from Deloitte, which will hopefully draw your attention to any early work that needs to be done so we don't suffer the delays that we did last time?
Through you, Chair, if I may. So I'm not in a position to comment on how the handover went between Deloitte, who were the auditors for 22-23, and my colleagues who were the auditors for 23-24. Suffice to say that in discussion with colleagues, my understanding is that the 23-24 audit is well progressed, very close to conclusion. But clearly, as I alluded to in my initial introduction, some of the responses from Dorset Pension Fund were received later than anticipated, recognising that they were also dealing with queries from the predecessor auditors. But nonetheless, we are in a much different position to where the pension fund audit was in the prior year, and are confident that with just over a month to go, we will be in a position, A, to receive a letter from the pension fund auditors to enable me to conclude for BCP, and also that the pension fund auditors will be in position to issue their opinion in relation to the pension fund.
Thank you for that. Okay, we don't need to take a formal vote on this. It's just to note Mr. Barber's report, and you'll be joining us, I think, for our next meeting in February, and let us have more news at that stage. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for attending. Moving on now to item 7 on the agenda. It's the Treasury Management Monitoring Report for the period April to December 2024 and the Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26. We've got joining us online Matt Filmer. Mr. Filmer, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Audit and Governance Committee. So if I focus on the first part of the report, which is the normal quarterly update, and this is for quarter 3. Now, the report always starts off with an economic update, and since we last met for the quarter 2 update, the Bank of England have decreased the bank rate to 4.75% in November, but held them static in December. Now, there's mixed view as to whether they're going to decrease the rate in February when they meet next. Latest inflation figures did show a decline in December, which did surprise the market somewhat, but it's still above the 2% target. You might remember at the last committee, we had some discussion around how that impacts on the council's debt and what that means in terms of borrowing costs. And we had a bit of discussion around the gilt market. And this is how the government sell its debt off and determines the rate in which local authorities can borrow at. Now, since the October budget announcement, gilt rates have notched up somewhat. But they have reached a peak, a historic peak of just over 6%, which is higher than the 2008 financial crisis. And actually, it's the highest it's ever been since the 1998 issue from the Debt Management Office. So rates are significant at the moment. The markets have calmed somewhat since Trump's inauguration, which did cause some uncertainty in the market. But it's still very significant in terms of the borrowing costs that the council's facing. So turning to the Treasury performance, table 2, it sets out the forecast for the year, which is a slight improvement from last quarter, still at 2.2 million, which is a reduction of just over 200,000, and that being around the cost of borrowing and less investment interest earned on balances that the council does hold. Table 3 and 4 set out the council's short-term and long-term borrowing. You'll see the short-term borrowing as at the end of December was just over 100 million, and we're forecast by the end of March to hold 125 million in short-term debt, and that's debt to manage the overall cash position of the council. And table 5 sets out the total investments held at the end of December, which was 48.5 million. And you'll see on the maturity dates, a lot of those investments have now been recalled and have been used to manage the cash position. So moving to the second part of the report, which introduces the Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26, which is on Appendix 1. And there's also the Treasury Management Practices and Policies, which is Appendix 2. Now, the key thing with the Treasury strategy is it evolves every year, and it's a key financial document as part of the budget setting. It sets out how we're going to support capital investment. It sets out how we manage our cash, who we invest with, how much we invest with, and sets out a number of key measures, which we know as the prudential indicators. And this sets out things such as debt limits and counterparty limits. Now, the changes actually are very limited in terms of the Treasury strategy and the policies and practices. The key change, which the report sets out, is in regards to addressing the overall DSG cash issue, the Dedicated Schools Grant, which, if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll refer to the Section 151 officer because there are a number of updates that the committee need to be aware of. So I'll stop there, Chair, and the Section 151 officer can carry on.
Mr. Richards, can you update us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to highlight, what the report refers to in sections 19 and section 20 is the fact that when we put this report together, we were looking to borrow £57.5 million to fund the excess high needs expenditure for 25-26. Now, because that's revenue expenditure, what the report said is that in order to finance that, we will need a capitalisation direction from government, which is permission to borrow to finance that 57.5. Now, since we produced this report, we produced the budget report for 25-26, and that gives a slight update with regards to that, because what it says is that we are in a process of clarification and negotiation with the government as to whether that is a formal capitalisation direction or whether or not the government believe that we have sufficient powers through the ability to temporarily borrow to actually finance that 57.5. Now, at this moment in time, those negotiations are not complete, and we need to work it through, both with the external auditor and SITFA. And once I've been through that process, I'll be able to clarify exactly whether or not it's a capitalisation direction or whether or not the council's got the ability to finance itself through borrowing, because it's still borrowing, but actually it's doing it through its treasury management powers. And that I'll be able to offer the clarification probably to either Overview and Scrutiny Committee next Monday or to Cabinet next Wednesday.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Filmer, do you want to carry on?
I'll stop there, actually, Chair. I think that's everything I wanted to cover,
Okay,
but
fine.
happy to take any questions.
I've just got a question myself. With that update, Mr. Richards, obviously we've got a proposal on the table, which ultimately is going to go to full council to approve the Treasury Management Strategy and approve the Treasury Management Practices and Policies. That update that you've given doesn't alter those appendices, does it? So we can vote on those.
Yes, Chair, you're right in the sense that it's borrowing either way. It's either a temporary borrow or permanent borrowing through the capitalisation direction, so it doesn't change those prudential indicators for the purposes of your conversation and agreement tonight.
Mr. Filmer's nodding. Anybody wants to ask a question? Councillor Phipps first.
Yeah, so just a clarification for me, one way or the other. How does this relate to our overall debt threshold? Because it's a capitalisation direction. I just remember when we've been in previous audit and governance meetings, at one point, I don't know, a couple of years ago or whatever, we voted to increase our debt threshold, and then we voted at another meeting to decrease it and bring it back down. So does this have an effect on our debt threshold? Does it take us over it, or doesn't it apply because it's a capitalisation direction? Could you just clarify it for me, please?
Yeah, the purpose of today's report is to agree what that threshold is in future. And what you're agreeing to is to take it from where it is now and increase it by £57.5 million to allow for this excess SEND expenditure that we will cover in 25-26.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Armstrong, you indicated.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask something slightly different with regards to the Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26. I was looking at point 52 on page 66 of the report. So it kind of links with what I asked about at our previous meeting with regards to ethical investment. Well, I'm actually starting to have a number of residents contact me asking about basically how our funds are invested and where, with concerns about ensuring that our investments basically are not bankrolling arms sales and any sort of activities that would interfere with the environment. So my question is, let me just find it because I want to read this out. I think that our residents have got a legitimate interest in knowing where our funds are held and invested, like for reasons of transparency. So I received an email from a resident this week with a request for me to start raising his concerns about council funds, about trying to understand why are funds invested, are they supporting arms sales, oppressive regimes and fossil fuels. Around the country, I know that other councils are exploring this. I also see that Unison is also looking at its investments in terms of ethical investment and procurement. And I'd like to know whether we will be following suit. Thank you.
Mr. Richards, can you give us some assurances, Councillor Armstrong, please?
Well, Chair, I'm going to pass you over to Matt, who goes to the detail of the Treasury Management Statement in a second. But first of all, just to highlight, Table 3 and Table 5 are clearly setting out who we are borrowing from, and Table 5 is setting out. Say again? Page numbers. It's in the front of this report. It's very clearly, but it's pages 22, pages 23, and page 24 provide you with tables as to who we're borrowing from and who we're investing in. So clearly, if there are any concerns with those organisations that you have, then clearly that is something that you can raise with either myself, Matt, or through with the committee. But I'll pass to Matt to see whether he's got anything to add to the substantive question.
For you, Chair, if that's okay. I do remember this point was raised previously, and I will just give the same answer that I said at that point, in which whenever we look to invest funds of the council, we always prioritise security, liquidity and yield of those funds. So any investment that meets an environmental, social and governance consideration that is also a secure investment in regards to our treasury management strategy is an okay investment. But what we found with, and this is the tale of local authorities, is the ESG products haven't kept pace with other investment products, mostly around the security. The other bit to mention, particularly around BTP Council's position, as Adam referred to in Table 5 of the council's investments in December, the vast majority, so 48.8 million of investments, 48 million of those was held within other local authorities. Only 850,000 was held in the liquidity fund. The council hasn't got what I would call excess cash to be considering long-term investment. We have to keep the cash liquid, and so we tend to use local authorities, which are very flexible, or call accounts, which are effectively bank deposits. If the council was in a more cash-rich position, we may then look at other investment products, which might also look at ESG products, but that would be something probably to scope out as part of the Audit and Governance Committee. Hope that helps.
Thank you for that. Councillor Claire Waite?
Yeah, potentially stupid questions, bear with me. If we are calling in loans, and these are our investments that we have with other councils, and they're potentially in the same situation, also calling in loans, I mean, does the whole system just collapse?
Mr. Filmer?
Sorry, could you just repeat that again? Sorry, the line was a bit...
I heard earlier that we were calling in some of our loans to help our cash position, if I understood that correctly. And I think that that's, what we've put in the table as our investments, isn't it? They are loans that we've made to other councils
Yes, yeah.
and authorities and so on. But if they're where we are making our... So we're borrowing from some and lending to others, and other councils and authorities are all doing the same thing. And if we are calling in loans, then surely others are also going to need to call in loans, including money that we have borrowed. It just seems like it's all on the point that it might all collapse if suddenly everybody needs their cash.
For you, Chair, I think it might have been a misuse of terminology, perhaps on my part, but what I mean, I don't mean necessarily call in as in we had an option to call the investment back. All those investments with local authorities were fixed. They were planned to end at a certain date. And if you see on Table 5, there's a maturity date, and that was the fixed date in which the other local authority will pay the council back its funds. All of the local authority market work on that basis. They're fixed durations. So you lend some money for a fixed period of time and vice versa. And so the system works on that basis.
Thank you for that. Councillor Broadhead?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of comments and then a question. I think first of all, and look, perhaps this is a conversation for next week's overview and scrutiny meeting around the capitalisation direction and the situation itself. But I don't think we can gloss over the fact that this is an enormous sum of money. I mean, even by the standard of other capitalisation directions around the country, and there are more of them than there have been previously, this is on the high side, not the stratospheric side like Birmingham, for instance, but you've got the Northamptonshire's, Western North, their capitalisation direction, I think, is about 10 million. Somerset was deemed to be high, was 17 million. Luton was 35 million. Peterborough 4 million. And we're looking at potential capitalisation direction of £60 million, which is just an awful lot of money. And Chair, I accept that it's really good to have the update from the 151 that they're exploring different ways of trying to facilitate this, because there are pros and cons to the capitalisation direction. So I suppose the cons of having a capitalisation direction, and this council has never had one before. You never had to take one. The cons of it are that it puts us on the naughty step with government, and it can put off the ability to get grants and things like that if we accept it. So it's always likely to be avoidable. We've asked before as a backup, but we've never had to be in a position we've had to take one. However, the pros are that it forces the government into helping us to correct a situation. And I think there is a real danger that if we don't take a capitalisation direction and borrow the money on our own, that actually on essentially on a hope that the government will fix this issue long term, and we've been in this position before with this particular issue, then that potentially is quite risky as well. So that's what I mean about pros and cons to capitalisation, but that's more of a comment than anything else, because we're probably not going to resolve it here. The question I do have is maybe for the cabinet member actually. I think it was actually Councillor Beasley, when this administration, one of the first things I think it did was to bring down the self-imposed cap on borrowing. And there was some pushback, I think, from Councillor Beasley and others at the time, that are we not just going to get into a position where we're going to have to go up and down in terms of this cap that we brought on ourselves? And I think this is actually the second time that we've actually asked to increase this self-imposed cap, or it might be, I think maybe both of them tonight, because I think the other one was a Hawkwood Road. But the administration said that they're all about bringing borrowing down, and yet we're now here talking about bringing borrowing up to the highest amount fully. So is there any benefit in scrapping this self-imposed cap, or not having it in such a yo-yo fashion, would be my question.
Councillor Cox, so your name has been mentioned, so you actually indicated you'd like to say something as well. Can you respond to Councillor Broadhead, please?
I'd be delighted to, Chair. No, I mean, it was a deliberate policy right from the very start that we would reduce that threshold down to what we considered the minimum, and that it's this committee that actually reviews each individual request to increase that. And that's what we call good governance. And it's not open to people like me or the leader or anybody else to actually decide that they want to spend 10, 20, 50 million pounds here, there and everywhere on some grand scheme or another that might be in their head at the time. We decided that this was good governance, and therefore that's the reason why we did it. And I make no apologies for that. And I think it's a good way. If this committee has to go and review a number of requests to increase it, then so be it. That's what we consider to be good governance. But can I just also address, which I suspect the Section 151 officer wants to talk about, is the capitalisation directive. And if Councillor Broadhead had been attending a few meetings, he would have realised that this 57/60 million pounds has been on the table and talked about endlessly, it feels like, for months and months and months. We've always known that we were going to be asking for £60 million, circa £60 million, to finance SEND, because we've run out of cash reserves. There is no cash reserves, and this is all about cash. Because it's just added to the DSG deficit that we've got, and we need the cash to do that. So this is nothing to do with Birmingham, Woking or any of those other councils. This is to do with SEND, and we have specifically asked the government for help in terms of cash flowing the DSG deficit, and that's why we're asking for the money, not because it's a badly run council. As has already been said, the best value notice has been lifted, and they think we're doing pretty good at the moment. So I think what we're doing is a responsible way. The whole, if you don't mind me commenting, the whole DSG deficit funding formulas that the government have come up with is an abomination, as far as I'm concerned. It's appalling that we have this massive deficit sitting alongside the general fund. And it should frankly not be allowed. but it is, and that's what we have to work with at the moment. Now, in terms of whether we take a capitalisation directive for this or we don't, that's what is being negotiated at the moment. We have always assumed that because we were borrowing money for revenue purposes, that it would have to be a capitalisation directive. We're now being told by the government that, oh no, don't worry about it, it's all temporary. We're going to sort it all out in a year's time. The send crisis will be sorted out, and it's only temporary borrowing. So if it's temporary borrowing, you can do it. Frankly, I feel very nervous. I feel exactly the same as you. I don't like it, and that's why I insisted that the government put it in writing and say that's their advice, and that's what they have done. So that's the position we're in at the moment. We've already spoken to the auditor, who's accepted what the government have said. So he seems to be fine with it. We're now having to go to SIPFA and speak to them just to make sure they're okay with it. But that's the background. I'm as nervous as you are about it, but it's unfortunately this whole send financing is an abomination, as I said. It should not happen this way, but that's where we are.
You've indicated to come back. I just wonder whether Mr. Richards wants to make a comment which might help clarify things for you. Mr. Richards?
Chair, I do want to make a clarification comment, but I'll let the debate if Councillor Broadhead wants to come
Councillor
back on
Broadhead,
that
you
first.
follow up?
Yeah, and just briefly come back, and I thank the Cabinet Member for that assurance. I'd welcome to see that letter, actually, but I would agree with him that I think it's absolutely it's vital that we get something in writing from government to confirm their assessment of that. I still think I still share the Cabinet Members' kind of uncomfortableness about not proceeding in a more formal. I mean, it is. Nobody wants to be in exceptional financial support or have to have a capitalisation direction. Know that, feel it, been there. I get all of that. But as I'd said before, there is a benefit of the formalisation of that process that perhaps even with a letter from government saying, don't worry, we'll come to the rescue on SEND, it just might not manifest itself and then puts us in a very difficult position. I'd be interested, actually, perhaps not tonight, but to get the auditor's opinion on the level of comfort of risk they would feel with the council entering into a formal capitalisation direction for a specific issue and having a letter of comfort from the government that if you borrow for this, will potentially resolve it in the future. If they're akin to each other, fine, but to me, it feels just a bit more, one's considerably more risky than the other in my view, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Vicky Slade indicating to speak. She is a member of this committee, but also is a former leader of this council. So, Vicky Slade, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So apologies I can't be there in person. It's because the day changed to a Monday, which is a difficult day for me to get down. But just wanted to ask a couple of questions and make a comment. On the document, we've got table 3 and 4 showing what I think is supposed to say short-term borrowings and long-term borrowings. This is under paragraph 11. It's actually, the paper looks like it's wrong because it says table 3 short-term borrowings, then table 5 short-term borrowings, but I think that should say long-term borrowings. So if that could be clarified, because at the moment it makes no sense. If this is the borrowing that we have we reached that threshold that we set? Because I don't think it's very clear in here that whether we would directly breaching it through one or the other, or whether we're just getting incredibly close. But in terms of a comment about the yo-yo effect, which Councillor Broadhead suggested, I think that it's a good thing that we do this. I think it's incredibly transparent. I think it forces us to consider taking that debt in a slower and more controlled way than if we can just randomly borrow extra money. So I completely agree with this type of governance, and I think that it's also far more transparent because it does also give our residents the opportunity to listen to these meetings, come to these meetings and comment on them. So I'm very much in favour of this, and if that if that creates a yo-yo effect, so be it. I think it's a good thing.
Thank you for that, and thank you for spotting, Mr. Phil, I think, was nodding that table 5 on page 5 should actually read table 4. Thank you for spotting that, Councillor Slade. Obviously, you've got not much on to read in your evenings at the moment. Thank you. Mr. Richards?
Chair, can I ask Matt to answer Councillor Slade's second part of her question, and perhaps I can come back to the point made by Councillor Broadhead.
Absolutely. Mr. Filmer, back to you.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So, Councillor Slade is correct. It should read table where it says table 5 cancel short-term borrowings. That is table 4 cancel long-term borrowings. Apologies for that oversight. And in regards to total debt, so this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So the table 4, the cancels long-term borrowing, and the table 3, which is the cancel short-term borrowing, that's the cancels actual debt that we've taken out in terms of cash. But we also have a figure that we refer to as the capital financing requirement. And that is the figure of everything that we've spent in terms of capital expenditure that's been funded by debt. And the best way to see that in the report is if you look at page 36 of your report pack. There's a table under paragraph 47 which sets out the council's capital financing requirement. And this is an estimate because, you know, capital spend changes year on year and will change by year end. But we're estimating by the end of 25-26, sorry, end of 24-25, that we will have a capital financing requirement of just short of 550 million. Okay. When we talk about debt caps, that can be seen on page 37 of the report pack, which sets our debt limits. And you'll see a table under paragraph 52, which sets our operational boundary and our authorised limit. And for 25-26, we're setting a limit of 800 million. Okay, so you can see there's headroom between our actual capital financing requirement and our actual debt limits. And we have to keep headroom because debt will change on a day-to-day basis. As you've seen on tables 3 and 4, it's a moving target. But the point that was being picked up by the committee previously is where we've reduced that debt cap. Previously, those debt limits were in the region of about 1.3 billion from memory. So we've reduced them significantly by almost £500 million. So they're more of a prudent level, and should we need to increase those limits more, then reports will come back to committee to agree that. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, I've got Councillor Connolly's got a question, whether it's Mr. Richards or Mr. Phil, I don't know. Anyway, your question.
Yeah, thank you. So this comes back to, so firstly on the point about having the limit. I mean, it's very normal for any major financial institution to have to work to risk limits, and then you just have to consciously decide whether or not to go above them. It's just sensible management. I'm not sure why I would be questioning that. So my question is on minimum revenue provision, the MRP policy statement. This is on page 35. Now, we talked about this last year. We took this to full council. The idea is that the payments would be lower on an ongoing basis, but over time, maybe more or maybe higher further down the line. So we had a brief discussion about whether or not we need something in place to ensure there's discipline around this and make sure that there are overpayments made. Could you expand a little bit? I see it says that there are overpayments made, but I'm wondering how much discipline are you putting around that process to make sure that there isn't a substantial financial hit for further down the line?
Mr. Fulmer?
For you, Chair. So you'll see on paragraph 43, which is page 35 of the report pack. At the very end there, it shows the amount that we've actually made in voluntary repayments to date, which stands at 7.2 million. And that money is effectively banked and can be used to offset future costs of MRP down the line. Now, the Section 5 officer, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a policy that we'd take forward that, depending on the outturn position at year end, one of the first calls of any potential positive outturn would be to look at increasing the VRP overpayments. So it'd be something that, you know, remains as part of the financial strategy going forward. If that helps.
Okay. Fine, thank you. Mr. Richards.
Chair, if I can just come back on a couple of points. First of all, with regards to the £57.5 million capitalisation direction, if the government say we do not need one, then basically we accept that we can temporarily borrow for that, or the only other option I can see is we stop spending that money, and that will have a significant impact on our local children and the services provided to those children. So I think we just need to bear that in mind. The other thing I wanted to just clarify was the issue with regards to this council and capitalisation directions, because as part of the 22-23 financial year, we set a budget that included a proposal around beach huts. The government then changed the rules that meant that we couldn't use it under the flexible use of capital receipts as we intended in that budget. What that meant is we then applied for a capitalisation direction of 20 million, and we were given one based on a minded to decision. What then happened was the administration decided that instead of taking up that capitalisation direction, we would actually sell assets to form the capital receipts and be able to fund, if you like, the capital expenditure and transformation programme through that mechanism rather than through the capitalisation direction. So I just wanted to just add that element of clarity to what happened in 22-23.
Thank you for that. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not quite sure why that clarity was needed, because I didn't say we'd had one before. I said we'd applied for one before. But the finance officer raises a good point, because we talk about the fact that we've just come out of a best value notice, which has been lifted. That was put in place because these are the things that come on board with the capitalisation direction. There's a whole raft of things that come on board, even just applying for one. So we had to do that, even though we actually never needed that in the end. So it is difficult territory that we are entering into. But I hope that we get further updates on this before we make any kind of formal decisions, because I know what government is like on these things. They often give you notice very, very quickly, and I would reflect that although we're making a decision tonight, if there was a decision that came out further to these negotiations with the administration are involved in with government, that gave us that flexibility to essentially use the existing borrowing kind of flexibilities that we've got, it kind of feels like that should go somewhere as a kind of final decision, that or the capitalisation direction. Because to be brutally honest, it might well be that even if government says that was a possibility, there is a version of reality where the administration could say, actually no, we prefer to do it more formally rather than with a capitalisation direction, knowing all of those negatives that might come with it. But it feels like it's a decision point. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. We've given it a good airing. Oh, Councillor Beasley, you haven't spoken.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just wanted to go back, if I may, to the question asked by Councillor Armstrong, to which Mr. Filmer gave a response, and it, I think, originated in Table 5, the investment summary, and the ESG issues which he raised earlier. I think it may be that the correspondence that Councillor Armstrong and perhaps others have received was inappropriately worded, because I think it's referring to the Dorset County Pension Fund investments rather than the financial instruments used for deposits. If that is the case, then much of that is now being managed through various funds of the Brunel Pension Partnership, and it means that we are really wedded not just to the ESG issues but to responsible investment, and Brunel is a front runner in that. In the past, Chairman, I provided some wording to explain that situation, so I'd be prepared to do that again if there are further emails coming through in the future. It will only be repeating the position about fiduciary duty and the achievements of Brunel Pension Partnership in terms of responsible investment, but it can be helpful to members who perhaps aren't necessarily used to dealing with the pension fund. So if members want to do that, if further correspondence comes through, I'm not looking for work because there will be some work involved in it, but I'd be happy to assist if I can.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion. Councillor Armstrong, you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to acknowledge Councillor Beasley and say thank you. I'd take you up on that offer. I think actually what that highlights, actually just hear you say that, is perhaps some lack of clarity or maybe a bit of confusion on language or which pots and which sources of the funding are what, or just that broader sort of understanding of how local government finance works. I'd certainly be up for having further conversation and training around understanding that. However, I do think that there's more that we can do to get those messages out about the ESG side of things and to be able to demonstrate to residents that we do take their concerns really seriously in terms of are we inadvertently investing in companies who may be supporting like fossil fuels or human rights abuses. I think it is just doing some kind of mapping and being able to demonstrate actually that we are really committed to not doing that. I'm not able to provide that assurance to people at the moment, and I'd really like to be able to. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mike Cox, I think you indicated?
Yeah, it's just to come back, if you don't mind, on this SEND capitalisation directive, not capitalisation directive. There was an awful lot of work went in when we realised some months ago that we would have to have a capitalisation directive. And actually what we desperately did not want to do is to call it a capitalisation directive. And that's apparently the only tool that the Treasury have in the box, so that we were stuck with that word. So we stuck SEND in front of it and so called it a SEND capitalisation directive, which actually the government swallowed. And the reason we did that was actually to say, but we're not taking account of all of those other things that you normally do with capitalisation directives. You know, we're not having an MRP on it. We're not doing, you're not going to call in the consultants and the auditors and all these sort of things, because actually there's nothing wrong with what we're doing. We're in a difficult situation because of SEND, because of your policy to do with SEND, and they accepted that. They, all the way through, they've accepted that. So it's completely different from the SEND directive that every other council's gone into. And I suspect it's because of that negotiation that they've suddenly changed tack and have now turned around and said, no, maybe it's not a capitalisation directive. Maybe you can do something else. Now, as the finance officer has already said, that if they've said to us, you can borrow temporarily, we don't really have a choice. We have to do that. We shouldn't, we can't really go for capitalisation directive at the moment. So that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you for that. Then, Councillor Broadwood, then I think we want to move forward.
One final point from me, and then I'll shut up. And in the spirit of one former deputy leader to the current deputy leader, beware, I would say. I have had conversations with government around a capitalisation direction that we won't call a capital direction because they were very supportive of what we were doing at the time, and then they end up calling it a capitalisation direction and putting all of the limits on it. So look, I sound like I'm conflicted here because I spent half the meeting saying don't go for one, and then half of the meeting saying kind of avoid it. But I think we've just got to have our eyes wide open. Government will say lots of these things, but ultimately the name is what it says on the tin. Thank you.
Okay. For Councillor Armstrong's benefit, the list on table 3 and table 4, of the people that we borrow money or lend money to, table 5, are all local authorities or police and crime commissioners or fire authorities, which all themselves would have environmental policies. They're not companies you've never heard of that we're lending money to or borrowing money from. So I think, your concerns you aired earlier, if you want, you could contact all those people and ask for their environmental policy to allay your fears. But that's up to you. Councillor Conley, I think you want to make a proposal. I think you've got a comment first.
Just a very small correction. I've mentioned this to officers already. It mentions Royal Bank of Scotland in Appendix 1, and I believe it's now been renamed NatWest Group, and the ring fence subgroup is NatWest Holdings now, but I think you can do that subsequently. I don't think it needs any amendment from me. So with that, happy to propose we take a vote.
Yeah, so we've got in the agenda item effectively 2 recommendations, one for the Audit and Governance Committee. Councillor Clare-Waite.
Sorry to interrupt. I was out of the room briefly. Are you able to accept my vote on this?
We're going to vote in a second. So
But should I put my hand up or not? It's fine. Okay.
Yeah, if you'd like to second that. Yeah, so Democratic Service Officer will read it out.
Okay, so the recommendation is it's recommended that Audit and Governance Committee 1 note the reported activity of the Treasury Management function for the period ending 31st of December 2024, and it is recommended that the Audit and Governance Committee recommends that Council 2 approve the Treasury Management Strategy 2025-26 at Appendix 1, and 3 approve the Treasury Management Practices and Policies 2025-26 at Appendix 2.
Okay, we need a show of hands. All those in favour?
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, any against?
No.
So there must be a couple of abstentions.
2 abstentions.
2 abstentions. Okay, well that's passed. The second part, items 2 and 3, will be going to full council for final ratification. So that's at the next full council meeting. So that's item 7 concluded. Thank you. Item 8, increased borrowing, Hawkwood Road and Housing Delivery Council New Build Housing and Acquisition Strategy, CNHAS. What I would say at the outset on this is that there are some confidential papers attached to the agenda for the committee members and the independent members. If anybody is thinking or wanting to particularly delve into that aspect, then we would need to go below the line for that particular examination of those figures, not for perhaps coming out and having a debate and a vote. So if anybody is wanting to do that, then I'm thinking we might want to move that item to the end of the agenda. Otherwise, it would be going offline and asking people to leave the room. But if nobody wants to go into the confidential items, I've got nobody indicating, so I'm happy to proceed. Therefore, so I think we've got Matt Filmer, who will be presenting this initially, or Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll introduce the first part of this report, and then I'll pass it over to Amina to potentially come in with regards to the detail of the individual schemes themselves. But I just thought it would be worth if I just introduce the scheme by just highlighting that after the May 2023 election, the administration, as we've already heard tonight, reduced the debt threshold of this council from about £1.4 billion to about £755 million at that point in time. However, in reducing that debt threshold, the intent was not to reduce the ambition with regards to regeneration and housing. The intent was to strengthen governance around any significant new business cases to ensure that they are robust enough to generate resources to satisfy the future interest and capital debt repayments associated with those schemes. So therefore, they're here for Audit and Governance Committee to be, because of that Treasury management and that responsibility for debt, for you to just review those business cases and be satisfied that you consider them to be robust enough in order to generate the income that they need in order to make sure that any interest payments can be serviced from that income, or any debt repayments can be where debt repayments are required, because in the housing revenue account we're not required to make the debt repayment, i.e. the MRP payment. But with that, I'll leave it over to Amina to potentially give you a brief overview of the 2 schemes in front of you tonight.
Amina, over to you. Thank you for joining us online.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Chair. Good evening, committee. Apologies in advance, I've got a slight cough. The Cabinet report sets out the priority scheme for Hawkwood Road, which is funded partially by the Boscombe Towns Fund, and it delivers much needed affordable housing. There are 2 options set out in the report, and we've been progressing option 1, and that's with the clinical facility, and we're making good progress with the NHS. We've also submitted a bid to Homes England for the affordable housing grant, which has been well received, and we're in discussions with them about securing that grant. The general fund borrowing will be repaid from the rental income from the non-residential, which is the clinical facility, and the kiosk, which will be delivered as part of the scheme. The housing rental income will repay the HOA debt. You'll see in tables 1 and 2 of the report, which Matt has prepared, that the scheme performs well against the hurdle rates and is well within the repayment period. Harbour Sales is a proposed acquisition of 32 apartments. If approved, the acquisition will be used for temporary accommodation, which could contribute circa 800k in savings per annum, and that's against the bread and breakfast cost in the general fund. Again, the rental income will repay the debt in the general fund, and on table 3 you can see that the scheme performs and is in a positive position by year 20.
Thank you for that. And perhaps for the members of the public listening in, the Hawkwood Road car park is the one just to the south of Sainsbury's and Primark. There are other retailers obviously in Boston, not just those two. And the one down in Poole is next door to Asda, I think, geographically.
Thank you, Chair.
You've got the recommendation set out there, items A and B. That there is one typo which I spotted, which I have raised with the officers, which I think I better draw to your attention now. Otherwise, we might go around in circles if people are misreading it. If you go to page 87, on item B, this is for the pool site. The last line, or the penultimate line, where it says in the business cases, it should read if. So therefore, to give it its context, borrowing for option 2 of this scheme and the proposal, if the business cases for the financing of this debt of option 1 cannot be delivered. And I think, Matt Filmer, I think you would accept that correction.
Yes, Chair, I would. Sorry, for some reason it's dropped. My Teams has dropped off, but yeah, I would.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. So in that context, I think the other comment to make here, I will bring in Vicky Slade very, very shortly, is this has gone through Cabinet. Cabinet has already considered these two matters. So effectively, this is to adhere to the procedures, gone through Cabinet, coming to us, and this will be going to full council. So Vicky Slade, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if I haven't read the Cabinet papers. I'm assuming if this is coming on the 11th of February, I may need to ask the question again then. But thinking of it from an audit and governance and risk point of view, the provision under option A of general fund borrowing to facilitate the medical centre, it's one thing to build a medical centre, it's quite another thing to run a medical centre. And in the experience I'm having in my role up here is that the NHS don't seem to have the money to provide contracts for additional medical centres, and B, if they do, they don't have the staff to make those contracts a reality. So is there not a risk if we're borrowing as the local authority to fund a provision for a third party, that we don't have a guarantee that they're going to take that on?
What I would say, from my knowledge, in terms of medical sectors, doctor surgery is operated by the NHS. The district valuer, part of HMRC, does actually come up with a rent, which may not actually represent market rent, and I think the obligation would be for a doctor's practice to take a long lease on the property at the rent set by the district valuer, and therefore it would be effectively an investment. But Amina, do you want to respond to that query?
Thank you. And it's a really fair challenge. So we did explore a GP surgery in practice previously, and for various reasons that wasn't progressed. This is an oral health facility, so it's different to a GP surgery. And actually, we've made really good progress at NHS Dorset. We signed an MOU with them before Christmas, and that is in effect setting the rental income, which the Chair has just described, and that is based on evaluation. We're then progressing in contract and heads of terms. So you're absolutely right. There is a potential risk, which is why we retain the option 2. But at this point, we are far more progressed than we would have been where we were with the GP surgery. So we feel confident with the MOU that there is the business case being progressed as well through the NHS process. But we'd just like to say NHS Dorset has been brilliant in terms of working with us on this.
Councillor Connolly?
Can I just come back, Chair?
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
Can I just clarify, when you say oral health, you mean dentist?
It's a little bit broader than that, yeah. So it's like a training facility. I have to say, yeah, it's a sort of a new way of working.
The health sciences project with the dental.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I feel much more comfortable with that direct investment from the ICB rather than a GP. Given what happens on a lot of developments where a GP surgery doesn't get filled and we end up with an empty building. Thanks, Amina.
That's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Connolly?
Thank you. Yes, my question is related to that. The report mentions grants needed, including from Homes England. So more broadly, I'm very happy to support the increasing of the debt ceiling for the purpose of this. Is exactly why what we should be borrowing to do is we need to build these houses, want to press on with them. But how does the timing work out in terms of us borrowing and then grants not materialising? What are the risks around that? How do we make sure that you don't go ahead with a certain plan and then that falls through? How do you manage the risk of that happening?
So we've submitted a bid to Homes England for grant, and that's going through their process at the moment. So I'm hopeful that we will have grants secured in the next month or so. What we've also put in extra mitigation is that once we've started the procurement, that we don't award contracts until we've got the grant in place. So that will then secure when we commit the borrowing. Homes England have expressed confidence in our ability to deliver the scheme. They have supported the grant at the level that we've set out in the report. So hopefully we'll have the grant and be able to award contracts in the summer.
Councillor Broadhead, you indicated?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just one comment and then two comments actually. I mean, I don't wish to reopen the whole kind of ideological conversation about the debt ceiling, but it was kind of set out by the Chief Finance Officer at the beginning, the reasoning for bringing that debt ceiling down. And I would point out, because a layperson listening might think that if you had what was in place previously, which was a higher debt ceiling based around the CNAS programme. So the idea is that you had a horizon about the scale of your house building ambition, which then set out where you were going. But every single business case would still have to come back to the council for approval. It's not the case that once you set that debt ceiling higher to essentially say, this is how many homes we want to build over and this is how much it's going to cost. So you kind of have that longer term view around where debt is going to arrive at, rather than having it lower and then just jumping it up each time. But it would be, I think, incorrect for anybody to think that doesn't mean that you don't get the opportunity for full council to make a decision around each of the business cases. So I don't quite understand where the strengthening of the business case argument comes from, because any business case for any development that we consider always has to go through pretty much the same processes of looking at whether it actually corresponds to making financial sense anyway. But I do understand that bringing each one at piece, including the debt ceiling increase, could have, it's just another way of doing things, I suppose. But I just thought I had to say my piece on that. The only thing I would say, and I think I said this in the scrutiny meeting where we discussed this, is that I'm completely comfortable with the Hawkwood Road programme. It's been a long time coming. I've been quite involved in it, and it's really good to see that there is a medical involvement in there as well, particularly working with our key partners. I think it's exactly what regeneration in Boscombe looks like. Good affordable homes, as well as kind of keeping that employment level going as well. So very supportive of that, and long time coming. I do still have some concerns over the Harbour Sale acquisition. I won't go into what's in the confidential information, because I think it's irrelevant, except to say that I think it is public that this building has had issues for some long time, that it has sat empty for quite a considerable period, and there is a question mark over why. So all I would say is I'm still uncomfortable with that acquisition, but I have had assurances from the council that they're going to be looking very, very deeply into all of the reasonings why this might not have been the most saleable or wanted development in the past, and to cover ourselves on that basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Got no other people indicating to speak. Can we have a proposer for this? And the second, the Vice Chair is proposing. Councillor Claire Waite is seconding it. I think because this is going to have to go to full council, and it's a big financial matter, whether Dem Services you want to read out, or are you happy to take it as set out on page 87 with that typographical correction? Yeah, okay, we'll take the vote as set out on page 87 with the typographical correction of the word in changing to if. And I say this will be going to full council, so I'll be voting. All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous.
Yes, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Matty.
So thank you for all the hours of work you put into that, Anita, and your colleagues. Thank you. Item 9. This is the Risk Management Corporate Risk Register. We've got Fiona Manton joining us online. And this report updates the councillors on the position of the council's corporate risk register, and we've got some updates. So Fiona, if you could give us your update, please. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening. This is the quarterly update to the committee of the council's corporate risk register. As part of the continuing development of risk management and the reporting of this, to assist members this quarter, I've included again a summarised version of the risk management process we follow. This is included as Appendix 1 on page 99 of your report bundle. To further support members in the approach of the council at Appendix 2 on page 101, I've included the council's risk matrix. The matrix included is a 4x4 matrix where risks are mapped by assessing both the likelihood and the impact. The basis of the assessment in terms of impact is provided by the definitions on page 102, with the likelihood being outlined on page 103. The assessment, you note, is based on 7 possible aspects of the risk and encourages factors other than financial risk to be considered to ensure the full implications of the risk are understood and evaluated. This encourages an accurate scoring. In addition to these documents, to continue to assist members, I've wanted to provide a little background about the approach we have to risk management and the quarterly process we follow. Each of the corporate risks are owned or have the oversight of a corporate director. Each quarter, each risk is reviewed in terms of the following criteria by the risk lead or the risk owner. The questions we ask ourselves are, does the risk title best describe the risk? Are there any additional mitigations to note? What future key actions are planned? And what update can be provided on the risk for the quarter? What changes are there to the risk scoring? And are there any changes to the overall risk strategy in terms of the treatment of the risk? My role in this is to collate the updates and report on the risk register. The format of the reporting of the risks has been developed over time, with adjustments being made following feedback from officers or from this committee, and these adjustments continue. I'm always happy to receive feedback on and adjust the style of the reporting if this would assist members with the continuing reporting of risk. The register you see here today is the corporate risk register. This represents the top level of risk, and by this I mean that it's sat below this register are key assurance risk registers, project, and in some instances team risk registers. So this is a pyramid of risk. On the completion of the quarterly reporting cycle, the corporate risks are routinely shared with the risk champions in each directorate, who use this information to inform reviews of their own directorate risk registers. To ensure the completeness of the process, directorate risk registers are on occasion reviewed by the Corporate Management Board. They consider if any risks need to be escalated via this process. In addition, they look for commonality of risk and consider if there are any new risks to be added. This is an ongoing and dynamic process. Risk management continues to develop, and both the review process and reporting will continue to evolve to ensure it's fit for purpose and meets the requirements of the organisation. In response to previous feedback, at Appendix 3 of this report, page 105, a dashboard report is provided, which provides a snapshot of information on the corporate risk register. It shows the current corporate risks, the risk lead, and the movement of net scores over the last 12 months. In relation to this quarter's update, to assist committee, at paragraph 10 of the report, page 95, the material updates to the risks are outlined. In summary, I'd just like to bring to the attention of members CR04, we may suffer a loss or disruption of the IT systems and networks from cyber attack. This risk was discussed at length during this quarter, reflecting on both the considerable ongoing work that's being undertaken, but also the changes in the external environment. Following the review, the score remains unchanged, but the risk will continue to be closely monitored. Risk CR15, we may fail to have in place suitable talent attraction, retention and succession planning. This continues to be one of the Council's highest risks on the register, and a comprehensive update has been provided this quarter. CR18, we may have failed to provide adequate customer interface. Following discussions at the October meeting of this committee, it's understood that the Director of Customer and Property Operations and the Director of IT and Programmes held a meeting with members to discuss the issues that were raised at the last meeting. I understand the feedback gathered during these discussions was very valuable and will assist those officers in the continued development of the customer digital programme. Further in-depth update has been provided for risk CR23, the potential implications of the dedicated schools grant financial deficit, and further details have been provided in this report. The final risk I wanted to mention specifically was CR24. This risk has been moved from the risk owner of Glyn Barton to Gillian Kay, the Corporate Director for Wellbeing. In terms of the risk position and new risks, we considered a new risk during the quarter, which was a risk around cliff management and stability. It was agreed by CMB that we wouldn't include a new risk around this particular element, but what we would do was look at risk CR24 in more detail, and we will split it so that there's one risk around community safety and a separate risk around environmental impacts. This update of a new risk will be provided in the next quarter's report. In addition to this risk, at the last meeting of this committee where risk was considered, 4 risks were highlighted and mentioned, and very helpfully following the meeting, Councillor Beasley provided me with a summary of some risks he would ask me to look at. As with the above risks, these risks have been considered in the risk cycle, and I'm liaising with senior officers and will report fully on the review of these risks, including how they may already be included or informed by some of the other risks. The corporate risk register in detail is shown at Appendix 4, starting on page 107 of your bundle. This is a snapshot in time, as the register is obviously subject to change with new risks being considered and updates being provided. During the quarter, the consideration of the corporate risk was discussed by the Corporate Strategy Delivery Board. It was agreed that routinely this board will undertake a deep dive into individual corporate risks on a regular basis, with subject experts attending to inform these collective reviews. The outcomes of these reviews will also be reported as part of the usual reporting process to this committee. In terms of the continuing development of risk, the risk management policy continues to be worked upon, and it's intended that the policy will be presented to CMB in the next few weeks, with the intention to bring the new policy to the February meeting of this committee. The team continue to monitor and circulate risk information, and in addition, a new risk app has been implemented and launched, with the majority of director level risk registers now present. We're currently working on a series of dashboard reports that will be constructed for different user groups to support the continuing risk management and risk reporting processes. Thank you for the opportunity to present my report, and I'm happy to respond to any questions where I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your report. Obviously, this is a quarterly report. Members, you've heard what Fiona said. You've read what. Is there any queries or comments? Councillor Connolly.
Yeah, a comment and a question. First is a comment on CR15 on talent retention. I just wanted to put it on the record that I'm very concerned and disappointed about the policy of dismissal and re-engagement even being talked about as an option. And aside from my principled objections to this practice, I do think there are serious risks around that. And now I think it's great that the report sets those out, but I actually think that the report understates the risks of this approach of dismissal and re-engagement. And ultimately addressing this risk, as always, is just going to involve paying staff properly and improving the industrial relations. So I'm glad that the risks around that approach are included in here. But I just wanted to note my concerns there. Question is on CR24, as you say. I'm really pleased to hear that you're going to be splitting that. I've talked before about my worries of these risks being too broadly defined and how good risk management needs them to be precise and actionable. And I think it didn't quite work, having the environmental impacts along with sort of policing around violence against women and girls, and sorting out chewing gum as one of the output actions for that. It wasn't quite working as a risk, certainly not with cliff management stability. So I'm glad those are being split out. And my request is that when doing that, you can make sure that they are really quite clearly targeted, what the risks are. Sort of environmental impacts widely, I think I worry about the scope of that. So your thoughts on that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Fiona?
Thank you. Yes, certainly I welcome the opportunity to review this risk in detail, and certainly in splitting them out, we will have the opportunity certainly to focus a little bit more on the environmental impacts. We need to be mindful there is another risk around climate change and our ability to there. So we will need to just reflect and make sure we're not overlapping in any way, but equally it will give us the opportunity to make sure we pick up any environmental issues in that one single risk.
Thank you. Councillor Phipps, you indicated.
Just a comment, really. So following the last meeting, where we did raise, myself and Councillor Beasley did raise issues about the customer interface. We did have a very good meeting with the officer, Matthew Radsip, and I just want to say thank you for that, because I think that was really helpful, and hopefully he is, going to be, well, he certainly said he would be looking at the issues that we raised. So I just wanted to comment that that was a positive thing, that we did have that meeting afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, got no other. Oh, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. It's a question with regards to it's the climate change risk CR20. I just wanted to understand because I know that we've been speaking about this risk as keeps popping up, and one of the mitigating actions was about recruitment of a sustainability manager, and I can see that there's been some action on the recruitment. I'm just wondering, is that person in post now? When, or if not, when are they about to be? Thank you.
Fiona might not have an instant answer to that, but anyway, what's your response?
I do apologise, I don't have an instant answer to that, but I will take that answer away and respond.
Councillor Armstrong, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Fiona. It's just again to pick up on a point about having some kind of record so that we can keep track of issues that sort of come up in the discussion about the various risks, so that we know which ones are going, what issues are going back with officers and then which ones are coming back. Because I think sometimes there is quite there's a really healthy discussion about, I'm not saying sometimes, most of the time, but yeah, it's good to have that discussion, but also to be able to keep track of points that are going back for further clarification and things, because I think sometimes it gets a bit lost.
Okay, so you can bear that in mind, and potentially perhaps in your next quarterly report, you could mention in your conclusion any feedback on points, like particularly this one that Councillor Armstrong's asked you. Thank you. Councillor Beasley?
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I just wanted to follow on from Councillor Phipps' comments just now about the meeting that she and I had with Matthew Rodset and Sarah Chamberlain, and ask that perhaps we could note that it would be helpful if we got an update from them in order to give clarity to the committee about what they have done as a result of the meeting that we had with them. It may take a little bit of time because they're going to have to rewrite some of it, I think. But I would like to tell the committee that they were both extremely helpful and extremely positive about how they could improve the system for members and members of the public, which is what we were seeking to do. And we'd just like that update, I think, so that we can share what they have by then achieved.
Okay, thank you for that. Chairman, if you could take that point back, that we need an update reference. Basically, it's the website, isn't it? And you know, accessibility. For
Yeah, there were
for
various
Joe Public.
issues. The website was part of things, issues with the website not working, functioning correctly for customers and councillors. There were several issues. I think Matty did make a lot of notes on it, so I'm sure he will come back if we could have an update on it, or perhaps what, by email maybe or something, or however we want to.
Yes. Potentially at the next quarterly report, you could give us an update. Yeah. Okay. So this is to note, this report. We're not making any decision. So thank you for your presentation and your report, Fiona, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. So moving on to item 10 on the agenda. This is the annual governance statement 2023-2024 action plan update. Mr. Stannard, you're presenting this. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee. This report starts on page 167 and it updates the committee on the action plan agreed as a result of last financial year's, that's the 23-24 annual governance statement, which you approved as a committee on at our July 24 meeting. The AGS is an embedded part of the statement of accounts as audited by Grant Thornton. The well-documented national delays in the external audit system, aka backstop arrangements, does not stop the council from addressing its own action plan. You may recall that this committee approved the AGS, which identified 4 significant governance issues impacting the council, and this report at table 1 on page 170 goes through the issues and provides an update on the action points. Just for noting, the shaded areas of the table are a repeat of what was presented to you in July to summarise each issue. The action plans to address those governance issues associated with items numbered 1, 3 and 4, namely the best value notice, delays in the external audit and mandatory training, are all very well progressed, and whilst some residual issues remain, it seems likely, and with a fair wind, that these issues may be removed from the AGS for the 24-25 year. With regard to issue 2, the DSG deficit and send, we've heard about that a bit earlier, and there remains significant issues for the council despite those complex discussions with government and other bodies. So this issue is likely to remain on the AGS for 24-25. I'm going to leave it there, Chair, and through you, I may draw other colleagues in to respond to any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Looking around the room, looking also online as to whether anybody's got any questions or queries. This is an annual report, isn't it? So this is your opportunity to raise queries on this.
Just to be clear, Chair, it's not the we've already approved the AG, so this is the update on the action plan.
Right, good. So this will be coming back again at future committees, won't it? Yeah. Okay. So if there's nobody got any questions or queries, it's a recommendation to note the report. So thank Mr. Stannard for preparing the report, and that's item 10 concluded. So Mr. Stannard, I think you're also dealing with item 11, Assurance Framework and Internal Audit Planning Consultation 25-26. So that's moving forward. So Mr. Stannard, over to you.
Thank you again, Chair. Global internal audit standards and the relevant public sector application note, this was previously public sector internal audit standards, requires the relevant board or committee to approve at least annually a risk-based audit plan and an audit charter. This committee is that relevant committee at BCP Council, and this plan and charter will be presented to you at your meeting on the 20th of March. Prior to that meeting, it's good practice for the committee to be consulted on the very high level strategic approach and framework so that we can incorporate any strong views or comments into the plan and charter. So turning firstly to the assurance framework shown at Appendix 1, this is the skeleton or map, if you like, which we hang the more detailed audit plan off. It shows the significant and key assurance functions the Council has in place and is presented utilising the three-line defence model supplemented by external assurance, which is sometimes referred to as the fourth line of defence. Crudely speaking, internal audit is the third line of defence, and our work considers the effectiveness and adequacy of the first and second lines of defence. In practical terms, this means firstly looking at the system, controls and operational arrangements implemented by service management, which is the first line of defence. Then secondly, the support and advice, the checks and balances and the oversight offered by the second line of defence, which are the corporate teams, the corporate boards, the culture and so on. Ultimately, of course, this is to ensure that the assurance framework contributes to the Council achieving successfully its stated objectives and outcomes. Turning to the high-level internal resource allocation on the tables at page 179 and 180, one of my key responsibilities is to ensure sufficient resources available to provide a suitably robust overall annual opinion based on all the work undertaken. I am planning for a net reduction in staff days of 135 in the 25-26 plan, This is actually the result of our planned investment in apprenticeships coming to its successful end in September 25. The plan is that our 3 apprentices will complete their level 4 internal audit practitioner qualifications, and 2 of those 3 will be offered a substantive auditor role. So overall, 135 days less in the plan, but those remaining days are now performed by qualified audit practitioners and a reduction in training days accordingly. Also note the ending of the single person discount trial project shown under the corporate fraud line, where the saved days have been mostly returned to the high level risk section where the days came from last year to enable that trial to take place. Global internal audit standards does require me to positively state to the committee that I believe the proposed resource allocation is sufficient to meet my own professional obligations and, more importantly, is also sufficient to provide the Council and you as a committee with a suitably robust, qualified and experienced internal audit function for 25-26. I do believe this to be the case in this report. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thanks for that. You mentioned that you've got people advancing from trainees to qualified auditors. Are you also now looking for fresh people to join BCP as trainee auditors, replacing the people that are now sort of moved up one step?
No, Chair, because we have a finite resource. We had a particular strategy because we found recruitment and retention very difficult. This was a quite aggressive strategy to employ 3 apprentices with a view of growing our own. We've now grown that own, but we do have the limit the resource enables.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Claire Way.
Where are we now with charging a premium on second properties? Is that's still something that we're planning to do? And I thought that that was going to be sort of a pilot project within your department, a little bit similar to the single person discount, and you would need to swap your resource from that project to this project. Have I got that wrong?
Chair, just to confirm, if I may, regards to second homes premium, this council agreed that that would apply from the 1st of April 2025 onwards. That is the intent of this council, and in the tax base calculation that went to Cabinet in January, they agreed a higher tax base because of that extra council tax income. So the team are gearing themselves up for its implementation, and so that when the council tax bills go out, those that we think it applies to, they'll be asked to pay that extra premium.
So are they, that's going to be pursued by the revenues team rather than Nigel's team like the SPD did. How are you worried that there's a bit of over optimism? No, do you know what? This is not relevant to this. I'll ask you about that separately.
Okay, Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm going to show my naivety in asking this question. It's the first time sat on this side of the A&G committee. I've been on the other side a few times, but so I haven't seen this before, and I just want to get an idea of whether my reading of what we're looking at here, and therefore the input we can put in, is the right one. So I think I heard that this ahead of the kind of formal decision making on the internal assurance framework, that this is the opportunity to kind of check the workings out and make any suggestions from the committee. And Appendix 1 that Nigel referenced is the assurance and I suppose governance framework. So kind of what assurance and governance systems are in place to essentially assure against risk. Is that correct? And you've got the first line of assurance, which are directors and managers, second line of assurance, third line of assurance. So is this the appropriate point if we've got concerns or questions around the content of that, and whereby we may be a little bit shy to raise now, or is that at a different forum?
I don't know the answer, but Mr. Stannard probably does.
Yeah, Councillor Broadhead, you're absolutely right. This is the key assurance areas. Now, of course, we've got assurance areas in lots of other layers, but it is the right forum to raise if you think there's a key assurance missing, or even if there's other layers of assurance you want clarification on. I can do that outside of committee or here, if whichever you prefer.
Come back. Yep.
Thank you. I didn't want to start raising things if I got the wrong end of stick. So thank you for that. I suppose the one point I would raise, and look, Chair, I've mentioned this in a number of other forums before. It's a lack of elected member input in a lot of these assurance and governance frameworks, particularly since we've removed, for instance, councillors on our partnership boards in such things as Seascape, etc. But also just in general, there seems to be a relative move away from a number of boards that had elected members on that fulfilled that kind of second line of assurance, where I would say corporate oversight. And just two areas that I feel are a particular risk, because they're always risky, are the partnerships section and the asset management section. So from a partnerships point of view, as far as I can see it, when you get to that second line of assurance, in fact, when we get to anywhere whereby we're talking about governance assurance, the elected member oversight and accountability throughout the process is really now limited, and really just falls to us at the end if and when things go wrong. So it's just more of a comment than anything else, but I really do think there is value in strengthening the elected member governance input generally, but particularly in that area, and also in the asset management section. You know, we've experienced many times over this council and preceding authorities that you have to have a really tight grip on the asset investments and construction and all sorts of the other things that we do in the kind of capital sphere, because things always overrun, and the amount of times as councillors that we go to a full council meeting because some of our major capital projects have overrun on costs and we need to approve an increased funding envelope. Or wouldn't it be better if we had much more elected member accountability as part of that process? Now, that used to exist on the asset section in what is now called the Asset Investment Panel, which used to be, I think, Adam will correct me if I'm wrong, but it had a slightly wider scope at one point that included not just investments but also essentially capital management. So I suppose there's one question in there, is that what elected member involvement do we have in those projects and the governance and the assurance around those? I'll give an example. We've just two items ago approved two major capital projects. The one which is the Sale building, I've forgotten what it's called, Harbour Sale, and the Hawkwood Road. What mechanisms do we currently have for elected members to have ongoing oversight and therefore assurance as part of that process? So that's probably one question, if I may. Does that exist at the moment?
Councillor Broadhead, at the top of the diagram on Appendix 1 is the Audit and Governance Committee. So this committee is the delegated committee that has those things you're talking about. So I think if you feel they're weak or insufficient, this is the committee to air them in the context of discussions around the assurance framework and the annual governance statement.
Come back, yeah.
And I understand that. It just, I suppose I would then say it just doesn't feel like enough. I think with a number of these areas, just having the audit and governance, I always view the audit and governance committee as keeping an oversight over the processes, and then at various points looking at key issues. What I'm talking about is a kind of slightly more mundane, iterative process of having elected member involvement in each of these areas and in an assurance framework kind of point of view, which has existed at various points in the past. So I suppose that would be my point. I still feel that we are very, very shy in this council at the moment in terms of elected member involvement in having ongoing assurance in a number of these areas. Thank you.
Thank you for that. From the chair, I would ask Councillor Mike Cox to comment, because obviously you're the portfolio holder for finance, and some of the matters Councillor Broadhead has been alluding to involve acquisitions, disposals, projects which are stalled and things like that. Would you say your portfolio brief encompasses some of that knowledge and involvement?
To be honest, I think he raises a good point, actually. So the chart is just officer driven at the moment in terms of the assurances given, and there's nothing in there at the moment which shows where politicians, effectively elected members, fall within that, and I think the graph could be strengthened by including where there is member involvement, and whether that's the cabinet, whether that's overview and scrutiny committee, whether that's the audit and governance. I think that might, to be honest, I think that's a fair challenge to strengthen that particular framework. So I'm in terms of individual lines, I don't think member involvement should get involved in fire safety, for instance. Not like, in terms of the individual lines, but there are probably some lines in there, and I think you just mentioned two, in terms of asset management and partnerships, where members do get involved and quite heavily involved at times, and so that involvement should be documented as part of the assurance process. So I'm fairly probably something for us to.
Well, Mr. Richards is going to come back on that comment. Okay. Councillor Cox.
Chair, I think clearly this is something that Nigel and team can reflect on regards to any future updates regards to that member interface.
Mm-hmm.
But just to remind you that the work of the committee, you have had those deep dive sessions during the course of this year, and audit and governance on specific issues. So, as an example, and I know that Councillor Broadhead wouldn't have been a member of the committee at the time, that with regards to disposal of land and property, you had a specific session and a specific presentation in November that went through all of that governance process, whether that was officer member, first tier, second tier, third tier, defence mechanisms. So those deep dive sessions were designed, I think, to try and get under the skin of some of those issues that have been referenced.
Okay, thank you for that contribution. Mr.
I think what I'm hearing as well is that it would help if this appendix was slightly updated to map what's already there, either another column or to embellish on the corporate oversight column, perhaps, to include members.
I think I would, personally, I think that would be very useful. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd concur with the Deputy Leader. I think that would be really welcome. First of all, because we do play a vital role in assurance and governance as part of that. So I think it's absolutely right that where work is going on, where there is active ongoing member involvement as part of that process, we should show it. I think the benefit of having that clear in there as well is that it could show the gaps. So it could show areas. So again, I know that there is some member involvement in ongoing asset management, but I still feel, for instance, that it is on the low side. And as front-facing politicians, we are always the ones that are raked through the coals when things haven't been done properly. And actually, that ongoing involvement would enable us to challenge more, and who knows, maybe even lead to better outcomes. But at the very least, by having it established there, what isn't existing, we can then figure out what isn't existing and maybe improve it. So I'd really welcome that piece of work. Thank you.
Councillor Connolly?
Thank you. I think that's really interesting. I think it leads on to a question I had already, but it would be helpful to clear up. I think there's my understanding for audit and governance is that it does tend to be backward looking. And I think that is different to what you're talking about that hands-on capital management project, project being delayed. So I think we should keep them separate. I feel that the A&G does have the capacity to have quite good oversight where we need it. But I'm not sure, even if it's working very well, I'm not sure it's going to speak to what you have in mind, which is perhaps more the realm for ONS. Maybe that's more the appropriate place to talk about that kind of live updates and live engagement on projects. So I'd be interested in officers' thoughts on that. As for whether or not we have adequate sight, it does lead to my question about how much scope there is, given the constraints of resource and given the timetable, for us to dictate where we want further work. Now, I found really helpful over the last year to have these deep dives that you mentioned, where we've done training. But in terms of actual audits, I don't feel like there's a lot of capacity to do an audit on something that we're concerned about. So one thing that I did have a note to ask you about was last year, Councillor Bartlett came to us with a very interesting piece of work he'd done on beachfront properties and breaching licensing conditions and breaching planning conditions and how they interacted. And we had a good discussion at the time, and a huge amount of work had been done on that. But we did have a note at the time that what else might be out there that hasn't been looked at in terms of breaches of planning conditions and the like. And at the time, we talked about whether or not it would be useful for this to be something that comes up in the internal audit plan. But the internal audit plan is somewhat constrained by the assurance framework. So keen on your thoughts as to how we can better ensure that A&G can dictate where further work is done on top of the helpful deep dives and things we've been having as a committee.
Okay, thank you for that contribution. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. It's just picking up at the point of what Councillor Broadhead is talking about with regards to member involvement and where that also may be lacking. And just looking at that list, looking at project and programme management, I mean, we've already had a conversation that led to a meeting that Councillor Phipps and Councillor Beasley went to with regards to customer and IT facing services. I think one of the benefits of having elected members involved, particularly I think in delivery boards or potentially in delivery arrangements, is that they can feed in directly from residents and members of the community and be able to provide that added value. And as an ex-programme lead, I think I really would appreciate being able to have the opportunity to feed in, but also recognise the benefit that I think elected members can contribute within that process as well. And then that two-way thing of being able to take that back to residents too and update them and share, well, this is what's going on with this delivery board, or this is what's happening within this programme and why it's important. And I think another positive example would be the transformation working group, where you had elected members that have been able to meet with the programme leads and sort of provide information and have that two-way conversation.
Mr. Stannard, you can come back on that.
Yeah, may I come back on Councillor Connolly's point? So in the tables on page 179 and 180, there's the high risk section, and that's where those discussions that we have in this committee can feed into that section. So I would really encourage Audit Governance Committee that the discussion we had with Councillor Bartlett on the planning issue, that's been taken away and it's been factored into that high risk section. So when we next come to do the planning audit, that is in the high risk and in the scoping considerations that we are taking into account.
Okay, thank you for that. Monitoring officer?
Chair, if I may just add to that, and building on Councillor Connolly's comments, this committee is entitled to seek its assurance by the way of assistance of other committees. So, for example, a referral to Overview and Scrutiny or the relevant scrutiny board would be very acceptable from this committee of, here is an issue that has been brought to our attention, please can you look at it and report back your findings. And that is a perfectly acceptable way of this committee seeking its assurance and then going back to the audit plan, back to the assurance framework as well. And it doesn't mean that you have to do all of the work yourselves. You can ask other committees. So, for example, you have a sister committee, of standards committee that looks after ethical governance. You can ask them to look at the ethical governance framework for you and build and bring a report back, or invite the chair of that committee back to feed in. And again, that feeds into your overall assessment of the content of the audit plan, building the assurance framework, and identifying potential gaps that Councillor Broadhead has just referred to, or things to build into your future internal audit plan or discussions with the head of internal audit. So that is a possibility for you. It doesn't have to be that you do all the work yourselves. Thank you, Chair.
Just to come back on that, if I can. So if we were particularly worried about the management, the day-to-day management of something like the Hawkwood Road project, and worried about costs escalating, that is something that we could refer to another committee to say, could you do a spotlight on that?
Chair, yes, you could. Depends on the topic of the area of concern. Obviously, you need to have some identifying factors so that committee can look at that. Or alternatively, you have the ability to invite the relevant cabinet member, corporate director here, and seek assurance from themselves about the topic in question that you've got concerns about. Just wanted to give you assurance that you don't have to do everything yourself.
Okay. Stand up. We've got this recommendation here. You've taken on board, because I see you're taking notes of comments and observations that people have been making. We've got a recommendation to agree the BCP assurance framework, B, provide any comments, which we have done, and feedback on the proposed draft. So we need to vote on agreeing it. So, Councillor Connolly, you'll propose, Mr.
I appreciate this is, in a committee environment, it's very difficult to just bang some views over. So I'm very happy to take emails or comments or conversations that people want to have between now and our next report to committee in March.
Yeah, and if people want to copy me in and the Vice Chairman in, then it's something that we can discuss at our next pre-meeting potentially. Thank you very much. So it's been proposed to accept the assurance framework. Looking for a seconder. We need to take a vote on it. Councillor Claire Waite. So all those in favour of accepting the framework?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
That's unanimous. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I beg your pardon.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. So we're moving on to item 12, which is the internal audit third quarter 2024-2025 audit plan update. And it's Mr. Stannard. Over to you again.
Thanks, Chair. So this report begins on page 185. Progress on delivering the 24-25 audit plan is going well and remains on track to deliver all I need to produce my annual report to you in July. The internal audit team has remained at full establishment during the third quarter. As reported last quarter, one of our audit managers has left last week actually for a promotion opportunity at another council, but we have successfully recruited to that post with no loss of working days. Paragraph 3 shows that 14 audit assignments were completed in the quarter. Please remember, I'm now posting these audit reports finalised in each quarter to the Microsoft Teams site that you're all members of. Councillors are free to look at all, some or none of those, depending on your preference. Questions you may have on the detail of those reports are probably best asked outside of committee because the reports do contain certain exempt and confidential information. As required by the audit charter, those audit assignments where we issued a partial assurance opinion are shown at paragraph 5, with some further detail shown of the issues found. As mentioned in my previous report, the single person discount pilot project has now ended. We've proving proof of concept, and the activities previously done by internal audit have now been moved to the business as usual Revs and Benefits, Income Maximisation and Compliance team. The internal audit pilot totalled additional council tax yield of 654k. I have agreed with the Revs and Ben's lead officer to continue, at least initially, to provide this committee with the statistics and numbers of SPTs reviewed by that team, so committee can be assured that the new business as usual arrangement continues the council tax yield numbers broadly in line with the trial period. In other work, grant certification as required by government totalled £4 million. That took place in the quarter. The implementation of audit recommendations by management remains good. The audit charter does require me to report to you any high recommendations that have not been implemented by management by the agreed target date. This shows 8 such recommendations, Appendix 1. Management's explanation for the delays appear reasonable to me, but I should remind you, as committee, you are free to require further written explanations or require a manager to explain further at a future meeting if you so desire, and if you think those explanations are inadequate. Finally, at paragraph 29, this refers to a £30,000 overspend in internal audit because we have been at full establishment all year and the budgeted 5% vacancy factor has not been achieved. I am managing that overspend against corresponding underspends across my wider team. That was remiss of me not to include that in the report, so I thought it's important to state that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question reference that single person discount thing, which is about, £2/3 of £1 million, quite a substantial sum. In terms of the time period, when did we start that project, which is ending effectively now? Roughly when was that started?
It was a 13-month project. Started November, late October 23 and ended the first week of December 24.
So about a year. Thank you. So, yes. So, can you, through me, pass on to your staff who've been doing that, our thanks, because obviously that money is extremely useful, and obviously, it's something that is going to be carried on. Thank you. Look around the room if anybody wants Councillor Slade is indicating online. Councillor Slade?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go a little bit further than that in saying that rather than thanking them for the money, which is useful, really it's not just useful, it's what they're responsible for paying. If those people are not entitled to that money, it's more than useful, it's a responsibility. I wondered whether there was any learning from the team around how we could be more, how we could ensure that monies are collected in other ways where perhaps people are getting discounted services that they shouldn't be entitled to. We know that, in fact, I raised this with the Minister a few weeks ago, that we have a lot of potential losses coming up from the increase in council tax for second homes because of people using their property for business purposes and getting the business tax reduction. Is there any learning we can do from this that might help us to minimise potential losses on programmes like that going forward?
Mr. Stanhope?
I'll give further thought to Councillor Slade's comments. My initial view is that this project is quite specific in terms of, you know, the requirements of people in volunteering their single person discount status. One of the there are a few minor learnings around the edges, Councillor Slade, but I'm not sure they're transferable to other key areas like the one you highlighted.
Mr. Richards, you can follow in.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, just to follow on and to provide some level of assurance that in designing the second homes premium and the collection of second homes premium, clearly the team is part of revenues benefits, and as we've seen, the single person discount is transferring into that revenues benefits team. So clearly there is that shared learning, you know, with regards to anything that comes through that process that can be, you know, considered. But also in reflecting on the second homes, there's that constant dialogue with peers and other local authorities to see if there's anything that anybody else is doing that is, you know, would protect the council, you know, and therefore would be deemed more robust, that potentially we would adopt. And, you know, every day's a learning day, you know, in that regard. And, you know, if anything comes our way, or if there's any publications or any notifications, then, you know, we'll look at those and consider those as to whether it's good practice that we should be adopting.
Yes, that thought did cross my mind, and, you know, certainly also the local government organisation, which probably is, you know, we're fairly late in joining the game on this second home thing. You know, other local authorities have done it before us, and if we could no, it's a new thing.
No, we're not late. You know, you know, there are the first it can be adopted by English local authorities is the 1st of April 2025, and we will be in the tranche that adopt it from the 1st of April 2025.
I think Wales did it first. Yeah. Okay. Right. So yes, if we could learn from other local authorities how it's been implemented, that will be tremendous. So looking around the room, Sam.
Thank you. Nigel, do you happen to know, with the facilities management, with the medium priority regarding the asbestos register, gas and safety and water hygiene, is this purely an administrative glitch, or are they behind and out of date?
Which page are you referring to? So
it crosses over from 192 to 193.
They are behind and out of date, but it's not all the council's fault. In some of these, some of the providers, you know, it's difficult to find adequate inspectors and contractors to do the work. So there are some mitigating circumstances, but at the end of the day, we haven't done inspections we should have done.
given that therefore this is a risk to health, should it be more than amber? Should it be red?
It's all risk assessed and it's judgment. I can take a look at the specific intricacies in this finding, and I can come back to you and I'll lay the what I found out to the committee.
Yep. Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
What I would say is some asbestos registers that you see say there's minimal asbestos or no risk or whatever, but they're over 10 years out of date since it was last done, and therefore on one hand, yes, it is out of date, but equally the document that does exist isn't saying there's that much there, but it's something which Mr. Stanley, you can take on board.
Yep.
Okay. So we've got, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. It's with regards to one of the other partial assurance opinions, the one about AI. And in my experience of risk management, not having a defined risk owner is a real concern, particularly for a risk that's like moved way up our corporate risk register. So I'm just wondering whether we can just make sure that there is someone who's actually taken responsibility for that risk, and that we can, perhaps that can come back or go on to our work programme to make sure that AI gets the resource and the support that it needs.
Yes, Mr. I was nodding, so yes, okay. Can I have somebody to propose accepting that report? Yeah, fine. I think it was just to note the reports. We don't have to take a formal vote on that. So, thank you, Mr. Stannard. That concludes item 12. Moving on to the last item, item 13. Yeah, forward plan, refresh for the 24-25 municipal year. Mr. Stannard, I think you can kick this one off just to explain. I think we've got two tables there. So if you just explain what Appendix A and Appendix B represent, please.
Yes, certainly, Chair. As we approach the end of this municipal year, the 24-25 municipal year, we've got one core meeting left of the council, which is on the 20th of the committee. Sorry, two. My mistake. Two meetings, one core and one extra. So the extra meeting is on the 27th of February, and the next core meeting is on the 20th of March. So they're shown at Appendix A, and then Appendix B. Because we are approaching the end of the municipal year, I thought it's sensible to put in the very embryonic draft of the forward plan for the 25-26 forward plan, with most of the core reports in for us to update as we go along. And Chair, you did want me to remind committee that if they want, and we've talked about a few of these through the evening, any ad hoc reports or training presentations that any members might want in the 25-26 year, to please get in touch with the chairman, who will then determine where they might slot into the forward plan in the year after discussion with officers and others. So that's that. Just on the earlier discussions on BCP future places, I'll take all that I heard earlier and refresh those two appendices accordingly. Prior to, sorry, the papers for this committee got produced before we had our briefing with chairman and vice chairman earlier around exact timing. So the aspiration now is to bring that briefing report, whatever we're calling it, to the 20th of March committee for that chronological timeline and all that stuff we talked about earlier, to that committee for then the investigation, once we've agreed a scope, to come in the 25-6 year at some point. did I get that about right?
Yeah, well, you know, and in terms of resources, because obviously we're trying to get a balanced budget and we've been sidetracked by local government reorganisation responses, everything like that. 20th of March, you know, is that feasible to get the initial briefing chronological time? Is that something that there's scope to do that in terms of timings?
We think that's fine. We think that's doable, Chair.
That's a doable, right? Okay. So has anybody got Councillor Beasley?
Sorry, Chairman, I've rather missed the date of that. Did you say the 26th?
20th of March.
20th.
20th, which is will be a Thursday.
Which is an audit and governance date in the diary. Yes.
It's an ANG date, yeah.
So, Chairman, could I just ask Mr. Stannard a couple of questions on what he said, please?
Yeah, far away.
Just for my own clarity, but no doubt for that of others. So, dealing with the scoping part of it, I wrote to you on the 1st of December with some suggestions around that. I do have more, but I was trying to keep it brief. So I'm intrigued as to whether you will pass any of those on in advance. Should I write separately to Mr. Stannard, which I'm quite happy to do, along the lines that I've already written to you, because they are issues that I want to be there in consideration before we get to the point of scoping.
If you've got other aspects which you want to tack onto it, then I think probably it might need to be a separate fresh email as opposed to two separate ones.
So in that case, Chairman, shall I write to Mr. Stannard and copy you and the Vice Chairman as I did previously?
I think that would be good. Mr. Stannard?
Can I just clarify, Chair? Because I thought you agreed earlier that you would have those discussions around scope at that 20th, because you'll be furnished with the information around chronology and timeline, etc. And then once you have that information, you can have those scoping meetings in the public session to determine what exactly extra or more you want than what's already been produced, and that will then provide the scope for the future investigation.
So, Chairman, in as far as Mr. Stannard's explained it, I think I support that because I want it all done in public. My only concern was that there was some sort of framework being presented for that meeting, and I just wanted to make sure the points I'd made then were in that first framework that went public at that time. So I think that isn't happening. So it is about tabling those issues actually at the meeting itself. Am I correct, Chairman?
Yeah. Alluding back to what I said to you in my email and what I've said publicly, we have a large number of new councillors and the two independent members, and I particularly want the independent members to be present and get involved in this, who need background information and not just reading what appeared in the Echo and Private Eye, dare I say Private Eye, about future places, because that's will be useful. And it might well be, and I'm not an IT wizard, that in this briefing note, chronological list or have you what, it may be useful if the officers can even implant a link to documents. So this briefing thing won't be War and Peace. It may actually enable you, if you are interested in a deeper delve into whatever project of Future Places or whatever, because Future Places did produce a lot of documents, and I don't want all those documents to be tabled, but if somebody wants to look at some of their documents, a link in this briefing note I think it would be very useful for particularly for the new members. This is something that I want in the public domain. I don't want it behind closed doors, and I think the starting point is this chronological list of what happened, and I think March 2021 when it all kicked off. Okay.
So, Chairman, can I come back on the briefing note? In that case, we've dealt with we've dealt with the other issue. So the briefing note is going to be prepared by officers, obviously, and I'm just keen to understand who's going to be the arbiter of how objective that is, because it must have no subjectivity in it to be of any use around what I've said earlier. I'm just concerned, to be frank, that it is put together over a period of time by a number of officers to present something which is not truly objective, not deliberately, but that's inevitably going to happen. And for us to have that information in front of us in a totally clinical way is going to require it really to be channeled through one person so that we be clear as to where it's come from, and then that then has to be judged against, is that truly objective? Is it just the information that is out there, or is there anything else in there at all? And forgive my nervousness, Chairman, if this inquiry is going to be of any use to anybody, it has to be very carefully thought through in advance so that we don't stumble when we could prevent it.
Councillor Conley, Vice Chairman.
Thank you. I think that I recognise those concerns. I think we want to try and keep this simple. This is a report to facilitate a discussion as to what we want the investigation to look like. And as such, I hope that when officers are putting it together, they are trying to have it as factual and as referential to other items in the public domain as possible. I'd be happy for it to include a caveat that this is by officers and there may be other perspectives, but to keep it as factual as possible and as many places to link to where there's other information in the public domain. I want a one-stop shop for where I can learn everything I need to know about future places, so I can come to this as an open discussion at our next meeting, our meeting in March. I really don't want it to be laid over with lots of commentary. So I hope officers have got that steer very clearly. It's a very simple briefing for us. But what I would say is that perhaps once the papers have been circulated the week before, maybe if councillors wanted to email around ourselves as to anything we're particularly concerned about and will want to say at the meeting, and then at the meeting itself, there should be the capacity to say, I'm not so sure about this. But I really hope that it should be just to the point. This is information that's out there. This is what the council have already said on this issue, and work that has already been supposed to have been done. And it would be helpful also if the report allowed a discussion as to what next, what the options are for us, of the potential ways forward. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, that would be helpful for the discussion. But it isn't trying to preempt any particular approach at this stage.
Okay, we've got the Chief Executive, Mr. Farrant. Mr. Farrant, hello.
Thank you, Jim. Just to suggest, of course, that role should lie with the monitoring officer. The monitoring officer has an independence and independent route into the council. That's just the council's monitoring officer is the ideal person to put together a factual chronology of what has been reported and where all those links are. So I think that should be Ms. Berry as the monitoring officer.
Okay, observation made, and obviously you joined us, after Future Places was decided to be wound down. Right, so Mr. Stannard.
Just taking on Councillor Connolly's points on board, what I'll do is I'll set up a channel within the MS team that you're all, so when that report is public, you can have your discussion on that team through the chat function if you prefer not to do it over emails.
I hate dozens and dozens of emails. It's annoying.
Okay, Councillor Armstrong, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's with regards to that scoping out discussion, I wonder whether it's worth us adopting some principles for what we adhere to kind of as we're going through the process, really, because I'm hearing concern about ensuring that things are impartial and free from bias and that we're getting information that we can assimilate for ourselves. I'm wondering if we could just put some principles in place, agree some together to try and protect that.
Well, I think, again, this document, the monitoring officer will help here. It's going to be a factual, chronological statement of what happened. It's not going to give opinions and make decisions. It's going to give the new members particularly, and even people who were involved, a reminder of what happened and when it happened and what did happen. Monitoring officer, were you indicating?
I think it might be a little bit premature to do that. I think the principles come that sit alongside a terms of reference or a scoping, because that looks at the boundaries of the work that you want to do. It looks at the documents, etc. So I think it just might be a little too premature right at this now, and that might be a discussion topic at the meeting on the 20th.
Okay. Given that good airing, is there any other comments or observations about the forward plan? Do please take up what Mr. Stannard said about other topics which you would like to appear on the forward plan in terms of our non-core meetings. Training particularly, I think somebody earlier said, gosh, I wish I knew more about so-and-so. Well, okay, mention it, report it, ask for it, and it can be provided. It will help you make better decisions if you've got more knowledge about how this council ticks. So there you go. We're accepting, because we don't need to vote on the forward plan. Your draft's there. It's a draft. We're looking forward to the next municipal year, particularly. We'll note the forward plan as drafted with all the comments that have been made. So I think that is the last item. Councillor Beasley.
Sorry, Chairman, to come back again, but on this particular item, and just for learning from the last meeting, is Mr. Stannard saying that he will update that line on the forward plan, and if so, how? Because currently, as drafted, which is what you just said, it says future places update report, which is not what we've been talking about specifically.
At the moment, it's on Appendix B, so it's actually got to be brought onto Appendix A. So that's we have decided not to put it into the next municipal year. We're hopefully going to get it into this municipal year. This chronological events document.
What I was planning to do, Chair, is I was planning to amend Appendix A to have a briefing stroke chronological report, whatever phrase, in the 20th of March column, so on Appendix A, and then on Appendix B I will use the wording that committee seem to be keen on, which is BCP future places investigation, although the scope of that investigation will still be up for debate on the 20th of March.
And just 2 points then in that case, Chairman. The first is that for the Appendix A, it needs to include the word scoping, because we said that was going to lead straight into it on the 20th of March. And I think that's really important that we understand that that's on the forward plan. And the second is that we've been talking all the way through about a future places inquiry. Mr. Stannard used the word investigation. It is an inquiry. That was what was agreed.
I don't think it was inquiry. The minutes that we accepted earlier said investigation. Investigation, inquiry, well, semantics.
No, it isn't, Chairman. It's what Councillor Phipps proposed and what we agreed, and an investigation and an inquiry are not the same thing, Chairman.
Well, I've signed the minutes now. The word is investigation. Anyway, on the 20th of... Sorry.
Just ask, we've got this as scoping now, it's the 20th of March. As we go on the forward plan, then what happens next? Do we have another date where this then comes, we have the discussion and then something comes back or something happens next? Because I'm very aware that obviously on the forward plan, so there's a lot on it and we need to...
It depends on what's decided on the 20th of March, because obviously it may be in terms of resources that it is something that can't happen at immediately the next meeting of Audit and Governance, which is scheduled for the 29th of May. It may be later than that. I can't prejudge as to what the meeting is going to decide on the 20th of March. So with the changes Mr. Stannard has outlined, reference moving things onto Appendix A, 20th of March, and therefore obviously amendments to Appendix B, putting it down potentially for the 29th of May. Is that noted? as I say, it depends on what we decide. I can't prejudge in terms of timescales as to how this thing will pan out.
On Appendix B, I merged the cells, and I think from what I've heard, they still need to be merged because we don't know where in the year that might fall.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so that's it. I think we can draw the meeting to a close. Thank you for your forbearance. About 14 minutes to 9, I think. Thank you very much. I'll close the meeting.